Some love must stay hidden, but never unloved.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Belle Became Secret Boyfriend of Alicia Forestlight movie. Before we start, please go support Justero9 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Belle is a male. A simple game will make Alice realize certain things she had unintentionally overlooked. A simple game that would bring her closer to someone curious. Chapter 1. Bellcranel. That was the name written on a small piece of paper in the hands of a certain elf from the Loki family. That elf was Alicia, one of Riveria's disciples, who was just staring at that paper, or rather that name, with a curious expression. Bellcranel, the elf thought, raising her gaze and seeing on the other side of the room that albino who was chatting happily with Roland Cruz. Secret friends. It was a game that had become popular in recent weeks in Arario. A simple game. A group of friends or family would gather, each taking a slip of paper. The person whose name was drawn then had to give a gift to that person without them knowing they would receive a gift from them. A simple and fun game to strengthen friendships or simply for entertainment. And that was something the patron goddess of the giant-killing family wanted to try, so she proposed it to all her children in the dining room, which they accepted since they found it fun, although some, like Bet, complained. So now everyone was gathered in that room and took a slip of paper to find out who their secret friend would be and give them a gift. MMM. And then it was Alicia's turn, who took her slip of paper and read that curious name of that cheerful boy in her family. Bellcranel, thought Alice as she walked towards her friends, hearing Loki call the next one. How did it go? Aki asked as she saw her elf friend arrive. Well, I'd say so, at least I didn't get stuck with Bet, replied Alicia, sitting down next to her friend. Haha, I was lucky too, I didn't get that grumpy wolf, the cat laughed gracefully. At that table sat a group of girls who were Alicia, Aki, Elfie, Narvi, Tiona and Tyan. They all thought the secret friend game was fun, so they accepted without hesitation. Why are you so excited, Tyan? Elfie asked the older Amazon, who was eager for her turn. Don't you know the hidden history of this game? The Amazon asked excitedly. Hidden history? The girl said, confused. Yes. Legend says that if you and your secret Santa exchange gifts, you're destined to be together, as long as you're a boy and a girl, the Amazon explained, her eyes sparkling. I'm sure the captain and I will exchange gifts, confirming our love story. Sure, good luck with it, Narvi whispered with an anime-style sweat drop. The game became popular in just a few days, and it turns out there are already many hidden stories, Aki said, amused by what the Amazon had said. What do you think, Alicia? They're just stories, nothing more, I whispered, watching as the albino walked towards the small makeshift box Loki had made and took out a slip of paper. He could see from her expression that she was a little surprised to read it, but seconds later she smiled and walked back to her friends. My turn? Exclaimed Tyan, eagerly going to take her paper. She was sure that Finn would come out, their love story had to be confirmed no matter what. Captain? He shouted happily, reading the paper, although a look of disgust appeared on his face. Ugh, Bet, the worst of all. Elfie had to hold back her laughter at the sight of the Amazon, who was whispering insults to the wolf, saying that because of him her love story with the captain would not be confirmed. And that's all. Loki shouted, drawing his family's attention. I'm glad you're all excited about this game. Remember, you have a week to prepare your gift and it's not okay to make fun of that person and give them something awful, like a rock. But I'm not talking to you, Ace. We're family, so show that you're great friends by giving each other decent gifts. And with that said, the start of the game came to an end, with some people clearly excited to go and buy the gift. How am I like a rock? Ace asked, puzzled, to a classmate standing next to her. Well, where do I begin? Meanwhile, at the table where the group of friends were gathered, they were chatting about that game. Heavens, I'm in a tough spot, Aki whispered. Why do you say that? Alice asked curiously. My secret friend is Miss Riveria, it will be difficult to find something she likes, said the cat with a finger on her chin. Wow, I'm so jealous. And you? Who is your secret friend? Alicia glanced sideways at Belle, who left the room with Raul while they were chatting and laughing. I prefer to keep it a secret for the time being. Really? That means she's curious, said the eager cat. Well, if that's me, then I'd like some new boots, You're not my secret friend, but I'll give you some after the game. Haha, I'm just kidding. Damn it. Tyan complained, looking at the paper. I'm going to give that dog a bone. I'm sure that'll make him happy. Loki said you don't have to give gifts to make fun of that person, Elfie recalled. You can give him a dog collar, Tiona suggested to her older sister. Hey. What a great idea, that's exactly what that flea-ridden wretch needs. Elfie sighed wearily when she saw that they didn't hear her. While Alicia was still thinking about her secret friend, she looked around the place where that boy had gone. That game had definitely given him a lot to think about. Hours later. It was already night in the city of Verario, and after an exciting day the members of the Loki family were already sleeping in their respective rooms. Among them was Alicia, who was just lying in her bed staring at the ceiling. Bellcranel, he whispered, remembering that albino. Bellcranel was a member of the Loki family. He had been in that family for a few years, being a level 4 adventurer, one of the most powerful at that level. He was a kind and very cheerful boy, which was what characterized him most. He got along well with many members of the family, but his main friends were Raul, Cruz, and the elf Lafia. And now that she had read her name on that paper, Alicia had noticed a certain detail. I didn't know Belle at all. Despite both having been in the family for years and sharing friends, they had never spoken to each other. He hadn't noticed that detail until now. How is it possible that we've never exchanged words in all these years? The elf thought, her gaze still fixed on the ceiling. She was very good friends with Aki, and Aki got along well with him, so how is it possible that the only thing she knew about him was his name? And if she didn't approach him, it wasn't because she disliked him. In fact, she liked him just by seeing his attitude, but she never found a reason to approach him and talk. That simple game had opened her eyes and made her realize how little she knew about her entire family. It's true that she wasn't obligated to be friends with everyone, but at least she should get to know them a little better, since they belonged to the same family. Who knows if one day there might be a problem in the dungeon and she'd get trapped with one of them and they'd do everything wrong because of the lack of communication and not knowing each other. I don't know Belle at all. What can I give him? She whispered, looking at the moon from her window. He slowly sat up in bed and began to reflect on it. Give her something she'll like, she whispered, looking down thoughtfully. I didn't know what his tastes were or anything like that. I could give her anything, but Alicia didn't like that. If she was going to give something, it had to be something special for that person. But the problem is that I knew nothing about him. How could I give him something special when I knew nothing about that person? Nor could I leave it to chance and hope that he would like it. I had to think of something else. Loki said we have a whole week to buy the gift, she whispered, bringing a finger to her chin. So I have a week to think about what to give him a week. Alicia let her body fall back, lying on her bed again and staring at the ceiling. I had to find out what she liked without asking her directly. I had to investigate. I know. She thought, sitting back down on her bed. I have a week, and that's more than enough. I'll have to investigate him to find out what he likes. I have to know everything about him. Now that she thought about it out loud, she sounded like a stalker. Thinking about it made her feel ashamed, but she had no other choice. That was the only way to know what gift to give that albino. That gift had to be special. She would like to receive something nice, so she would do the same. Although now that she thought about it, she was curious to know who would give her a gift. Well, that's the whole point of the game, not knowing who it is until that day. It's kind of exciting now that I think about it, I whispered, smiling slightly. As long as Bet wasn't the one giving him a gift, everything would be fine. It wasn't that he had anything against the wolf, but he doubted he would give anything good. It will be difficult to find a good gift, but I will try my best, she thought determinedly. I had always seen Belle as a kind and cheerful boy in the family, even though they never exchanged words, that was the aura he conveyed. It wouldn't be fair to give just anything to someone like him, so he would make an effort. Bellcranel, I never thought I'd have to give you a present, she whispered, gazing at the moon from the window. Meanwhile, in the room of a certain albino, he was alone on his bed looking at the ceiling of his room with a thoughtful expression. Although seconds later he stretched his hand to the piece of furniture next to his bed and took a small piece of paper that was on top of it. That was the role he took on that day in the game. And after seeing it for a few seconds, a small smile appeared on his face as he read the name. Alicia Forestlight. The search for a gift had begun. End of chapter. Chapter 2. A new day was beginning in the glorious city of Verario. The morning sun illuminated the corridors of the Loki family headquarters, which was somewhat quiet with members going up and down alone or in groups with smiles on their faces. After Loki's announcement of the Secret Friends game the day before, the atmosphere had become more lively than usual. Many members had already gone out early to explore the city in search of a good gift or to think about what to give. Although others didn't take it seriously, like Bet, who decided to wander around the dungeon, saying that he didn't need to rack his brains over a simple gift. Others were too excited, like Tiona, who completely forgot that the game's title was Secret Friends, as she shouted with joy that she would give Finn the best gift. Tyan became jealous when she saw that her sister got her beloved captain when she got fearless. Everyone was excited for game day to arrive. But one in particular was deep in thought in the dining room, stirring her coffee with a small spoon while her gaze was fixed on the cup. Are you okay, Alicia? Aki asked, sitting down next to her with a breakfast tray. Huh? Yes, of course, I'm just thinking, replied the elf, still distracted, remembering who her secret friend was. Are you still going on about the gift? The cat asked before taking a bite of her toast with jam. Alicia nodded slowly. Yes, I got stuck with someone a bit complicated, he said, lowering his voice. I don't think it's that complicated. I got Miss Riveria, that says it all, Aki whispered nervously. I don't want to mess things up with her. I'm terrified of imagining her face if I give her something silly. Alicia smiled sympathetically, but her attention remained divided with her thoughts. If I want to know what Belle likes, I should start with those who know him, he thought, also bringing a piece of toast to his mouth. And then he decided. Hey, Aki, you get along well with Belle, right? He asked, as if he didn't care much about the answer. She had to start her research in order to give that gift. Belle? Yes, I like her, we've been friends since she joined the family. Why? She asked, continuing to eat. Nothing, just curious, he said quickly. Aki raised an eyebrow in amusement. Do you like it? Alicia's face exploded in wrath upon hearing those words. What? No. She denied, very embarrassed, while Aki laughed. Why, you're a fool. Haha, don't blame me. You suddenly come asking me about him, so it's normal that I think that, said the cat as Alice frowned at her. Then why are you asking me? He seems like a curious person. We've been in the family for years and we've never exchanged a word, she whispered, nervously scratching her cheek. You know, he's always with Raul, Lafia, her crews, and they're my friends, so it's strange that I know almost nothing about him. Ah, I understand now, Aki said with a half smile. You got him as your secret friend, right? No. I'm telling you, that's not it, the elf replied, blushing slightly. She didn't want anyone to know about her research. Loki had said it was a secret friend and she would take it seriously. I'm just interested in learning more about our family members. I want to get to know them all better. Sure, Aki smiled mischievously, not believing that story but deciding not to insist. Are you going to give me information, yes or no? He asked, crossing his arms to Aki's amusement. Well, I know he doesn't like sweets. Every time we go to the city and pass by a pastry shop, he always tries to stop me from dragging him there, hahaha, it's always funny. Don't you like sweets? Alice whispered, making a mental note and surprised that someone didn't like sweet things. Yes, although for some reason he enjoys everything that has to do with pineapple, if it's a pineapple cake, he always gives it a try. Pineapple understood. Anything else? Aki smiled with amusement at how interested Alicia was. It was more than obvious that Belle was her secret friend, or she was in love. Well, he likes books too. He usually reads in the common room at night. Although I don't know what kind of books they are. I've never asked him about it. And that's useful, thank you, she said, finishing her breakfast. You're welcome, Detective Forestlight. Don't call me that, he said, frowning as he stood up. Haha, when you confess to Belle, tell me if I accept you. That's not it. Aki laughed again as she watched her friend walk away angry and embarrassed. It was more than obvious that she was investigating to give the rabbit a gift. I think this game is also an opportunity for the other family members to get to know each other, the cat thought with a slight smile. Well, Loki did do something right after all, haha. Later. Alicia walked calmly through the corridors of the headquarters. The information Aki gave him was useful, but not enough to give a good gift. I needed more information to investigate further. And he already knew who his next target would be. Lafia. If anyone knew more about Belle, it was her. According to what Tyan had told her, Lafia was a very good friend of Belle's, since he was one of the first to speak to her when she joined the family, so it was normal that the elf was close to him. He saw them go to the dungeon together a few times, sometimes accompanied by Ace. Many said that besides the rock, Lafia also admired Belle. This was due to the way she looked at him sometimes. It wasn't love, more like a younger sister looking at her older sister. So yes, Lafia must have known a lot about Belle. I just had to find her. And it didn't take long for him to find her. She was in the training yard, practicing magic with elegant movements, or at least trying to. Perhaps they were both competing to be Riveria's successor, but they got along well. Lafia, he called calmly as he arrived at the training yard. The elf stopped her training upon hearing her name and smiled slightly when she saw it was her. Alicia, do you need something? She asked, curious and also a little nervous, as was normal for her. I just want to talk for a bit, if you don't mind, he said, smiling slightly, hoping to gather some good information in that conversation. Not at all. He said as they approached a bench in the training yard and sat down. Alicia approached and sat down next to him. And what do you want to talk about? She asked, curious but also a little afraid. I hope it's not a test confrontation, because I'm not ready. No, it's nothing like that. Lafia let out a sigh of relief upon hearing that. So? What's going on? You see, I'm curious, the elf said, lowering her voice. Do you know what things Belle likes? Lafia blinked. Belle? He whispered, tilting his head. Yes, Belle. What things interest you? Pastimes, tastes, hobbies. Why do you ask? Lafia asked, narrowing her eyes and frowning. Alicia felt nervous when she saw his gaze. Why are you looking at me like that? The last woman who asked me that question just wanted to make fun of him, but I managed to stop her, she replied, still frowning. If you want to do something to Belle, then. Wait. Before Lafia could continue speaking, Alicia interrupted her. It is not my intention to make fun of him, I would never do that. She had just realized that Lafia was very fond of Belle. She seemed like an overprotective younger sister. So? He said, still suspicious. I just want to know more about him, that's all. I've realized I hardly know him at all, Lafia's gaze softened upon hearing that. I understand, so he's your secret friend. And no SE. Great. I'll give you valuable information so you can give her a good gift, said the elf, her shy but lively expression returning. His mood change was very rapid. Elves are strange, thought Alice. I am one too. Meanwhile, Lafia crossed her arms thoughtfully, thinking about Belle and her tastes. Well, sometimes he stays reading in the library or the common room, he loves to read. That was information I had already received from Aki. He loves books about heroes, they are his favorites, he can read any of them, even if he knows nothing about them, it is one of the things he enjoys the most. Alicia nodded with interest upon receiving valuable information. And food? Or colors? She asked, wanting to know more. She didn't want to seem like a stalker, but Alicia didn't like to do things halfway. If she was going to give Belle a gift, it had to be something truly good. He really likes the color black. I've seen him wear black accessories and black clothes whenever he can, and he loves spaghetti with pineapple juice. Interesting. You got to be my secret friend, right? No. It's for a personal project, I whispered, looking away. Lafia narrowed her eyes again. Do you like Belle? No. Why is everyone asking that? She asked, embarrassed, since Aki had also said the same thing, and she felt that the two of them wouldn't be the only ones. Because you're acting like Line when she wants to get closer to Bet but doesn't know how, Lafia laughed. Alicia crossed her arms, feigning annoyance. It's not that. It's just we've never spoken, and I realized I don't really know him, I want to get to know my family better. Well, you should talk to him directly. Belle doesn't bite, Lafia laughed. With the rest of the family, Lafia acted uncomfortable and nervous, but with Belle, she had a much more relaxed attitude, showing that she trusted him a lot. Thank you for your help, Lafia, it was very useful, she said, standing up. You're welcome, and good luck with the gift. Ugh. She doesn't like sweets. Enjoy the pineapple. He likes spaghetti. She loves to read. He loves stories about heroes. Alicia had already listed the data she had collected in her small notebook. He had already made progress in his research. But even so, I felt it wasn't enough. I needed more information. And he already had his next target. That same night, Alicia was walking through the corridors and found the person she was looking for. Good evening, Raul, Alicia greeted as she saw the boy walking down the hallways with some books in his hands. Alicia. Hello. He returned the greeting with a slight smile, walking past her. Wait. The boy stopped when he heard that, turning to look at her curiously. Is something wrong? Do you have a moment? Yes. Somewhat hesitant and confused, he spoke, wondering what the elf wanted from him. I just hoped it wasn't anything bad. You're close to Belle, aren't you? Asked Alicia, crossing her arms. Belle? Yes. I'd say he's like a brother to me, she replied with a cheerful smile. Why do you ask? I'd like you to tell me just a little bit about him, about his tastes. Do you like it? Don't finish that sentence, the elf pleaded, not wanting to be embarrassed again. So it's because of the game? No. Well, yes, but not because he touched me. It's a family getting to know you project, yes. That's it. The what? Raul raised an eyebrow, surprised by that poor explanation. Nothing. Just tell me, what does he like? She asked, a little nervously. And you'd better not tell Belle about this. Raul just chuckled at those words. It was more than obvious that Alicia's secret friend was Belle, but he would act as if he didn't know what was going on, so as not to make her uncomfortable any further. Well? Alice was still waiting. Well, he likes to watch the sunsets from the roof of the headquarters. He goes there when he wants to think. He also has a habit of keeping small stones or things he finds in the dungeon, if they seem unique to him. As souvenirs. Memories. Yes, he says that each object reminds him of an adventure, a person, or a feeling. He's very sentimental, even though it might not seem like it. That's interesting, she whispered, a little surprised by that fact. What do you plan to give him as a gift? Well, I don't know what. He's not my secret friend. Raoul laughed with amusement upon hearing that, much to Alicia's annoyance. Okay. I'll just say one more thing. If you ever give her a gift, make sure it comes from the heart. She's someone who values emotional things more than material things. Those words remained etched in Alicia's mind. Something from the heart. And if you need more details, well, you can always spy on him discreetly. I'm not a stalker, she said offendedly as she turned around and walked away. Raoul just smiled as he continued on his way. So Belle is Alicia's secret friend, she thought with a slight smile. Belle's lucky, it seems Alicia is really going to put some effort into the gift. I wish I had the same luck and that someone would give me a nice present. And with those thoughts, Raoul disappeared into the corridors to continue what he was doing. Meanwhile, with Alicia. It was around 9 o'clock at night, so she decided to go straight to her room to rest. Alicia closed the door gently and sank down onto the bed, sighing. Pineapple juice spaghetti books about heroes sunsets unique things from the dungeon, he whispered, mentally reviewing all the information he had gathered. It had been a productive day as I had gathered valuable information, but I still felt that something was missing. I didn't feel that with that information I could give a good gift. He turned sideways, looking out the window at the moon rising in the sky. What kind of gift would make someone like that happy? She thought, recalling the information she had received. Apparently, Belle was more complicated than it seemed at first glance. He didn't even know why he was making such an effort to give a good gift, perhaps because he didn't like the idea of giving just anything. Besides feeling that Belle didn't deserve such treatment, she always saw him as a kind and gentle boy. If anyone deserved a good gift, it was him. I'll continue investigating tomorrow, she thought, her cheeks slightly flushed. He is someone who values the emotional more than the material. Those words echoed a little in his mind. Perhaps that would be useful later when thinking about the gift. Meanwhile, I would sleep. Tomorrow would be another day of investigation. I still had a week to find a good gift. I was sure I would succeed. And so Alice's eyes closed as she fell asleep, completely forgetting that she hadn't put on her nightclothes. He discovered that doing research was more tiring than going to jail. End of chapter. Chapter 3. The second day of her investigation had begun, and Alicia Forestlight felt more determined than ever. Dawn had barely touched the walls of the Loki family headquarters, but the elf was already up, dressed, and walking through the corridors with a focused, almost military expression. After yesterday's research, I felt that today I could discover much more about my secret friend in order to give him a good gift. And today he launched his second effective plan. To stalk him, to observe him, he whispered seriously, as if he were in the middle of a guild covert operation. Her long blonde hair was tied back in a low ponytail, something she didn't usually do, but she had decided that she needed a perfect view without her hair getting in the way. It was the perfect hairstyle for this type of mission. He carried with him a small green-covered notebook, carefully hidden inside his cloak. This isn't harassment. This is research for a good cause, she told herself as she discreetly crossed one of the corners of the second floor, trying to control her embarrassment at what she was doing. Around her, some family members were beginning to move lazily. Tiona ran past in her workout clothes and waved with a big smile. "Good morning, Alicia. Are you going to train too?" she asked, her energy at its peak. Alicia was startled a little but pretended to be normal. No, just paseo matutino. But the notebook included? Asked the Amazon, pointing curiously. Alice discreetly hid the protruding edge. It's for writing down flowers, I see. Yes. Flowers. Inside the hallway? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Weren't you going to train? I asked, no longer wanting to answer any more questions. Fiona just laughed with amusement upon hearing that, knowing that Alicia was in the middle of an important mission. Good luck with your flowers then, she said, winking at him. And with that said, she ran off, though Alicia could swear she heard her muttering amid laughter, Aki was right. She sighed wearily upon hearing that. He needed to concentrate. It was time to begin direct observation. If I wanted to give a good gift, then I had to know more about Belle. A cup of chocolates. Clothes. Socks. Etc., etc. I immediately ruled out the most common options because, according to her, they were not suitable. Being an elf, she had a slight obsession with perfectionism, and that gift had to be perfect or at least good enough to make him happy. His investigation had begun. The first place he decided to watch was the Loki family's private library. Mid-morning, Alice walked carefully through the corridors of the enormous reading room, carrying her secret notebook well hidden under her arm and taking the most stealthy steps she had ever used in her life. Very well, according to Lafia, he usually comes in the mornings to read. Perhaps she managed to find something he'd like besides heroes and think of another kind of gift. She walked between the shelves until she found the perfect bookcase, one that had a direct line of sight to the tables in question without being too exposed. She positioned herself behind the bookshelves and settled in, ready for her silent and professional surveillance. But he didn't realize which exact section he had chosen. His gaze was only fixed on the tables. And not even 10 minutes had passed when he appeared. "There you are," she whispered, with a small smile ready to jot down details in her notebook. It wasn't harassment. She wasn't like that. "I just wanted to give a nice gift, that's all. It was for the greater good." She was a decent elf. "Let's see what I discover." Elle walked in with a relaxed gait, casually greeting a couple of colleagues who were leaving the library. He carried a thick dark-covered book under one arm and a steaming cup of coffee in the other. He went straight to the table in the back and sat down calmly. Alice squinted and leaned against the shelves, trying to read the title. An interesting legend of lost heroes, he thought, squinting as he realized he did indeed like stories about heroes. Since he liked stories about heroes so much, perhaps a book of that type would be a good gift. But I immediately dismissed that. He's probably already read every book there is about heroes. The best thing to do was to continue investigating. As I observed, I noticed more details. Elle frowned slightly during tense moments in the book. Sometimes he smiled to himself, completely absorbed. At one point he even let out a small laugh. "Is he laughing to himself?" Alicia murmured in surprise, although she didn't blame him. Sometimes she would start laughing out of nowhere when she remembered something funny that happened a year ago. "What are you doing?" Alicia jumped in fright when she heard a voice behind her, seeing Bet, who had one eyebrow raised, looking at the elf in surprise. "Nothing. Nothing," he replied with a forced laugh, randomly grabbing a book from the shelf to pretend he was reading. Bet stared at him in surprise, then looked at the book and the others on the shelves, and then laughed with amusement. "Wow, I didn't know you were going that way," he said mockingly. "Huh?" Alicia was confused by those words, not knowing what they meant. But then he decided to look at the book he was holding and the others on the shelves. And the titles. "This elf knows where to play. Forbidden magic in the royal bed. Elven orgasm level 5. The dark elf dominates me, and I love it. Among trees and moans. My rival elf stole my heart and my clothes. What is this?" She whispered in horror, flipping through a few pages to confirm that, indeed, this was not historical literature. Her eyes widened as she saw delicately erotic illustrations of two elves embracing in a waterfall. They were lesbian stories between elves. "What kind of section is this?" She gasped under her breath, shoving the book back in its place, filled with shame. "How indecent." "Haha, this is low-key section." Bet laughed at the elf's reaction. "I was just looking for a good view. I mean a place. A place to read. I didn't know which section this was." She excused herself, trying to hide her embarrassment. Bet looked at the titles, then at her, and then burst out laughing. "Passion between two hot elves, good taste, huh?" he mocked. "Shut up," he whispered, his face completely red. "Don't say that out loud, you stupid flea-ridden brat." Bet didn't even acknowledge the insult. He just put his hands in his pockets and walked away. "If you're going to spy on the brat, at least hide in the strategy or potion section." "I'm not spying on anyone." Sure. Bet walked away laughing to himself, leaving Alicia breathless and with all her dignity shattered. "I'm going to kill him. I swear by the sacred forest, I'll kill him one of these days," he muttered through gritted teeth. He glanced at Belle, praying he hadn't heard anything. Luckily, the albino was still engrossed in his reading and was now doing something else. He took out a notebook and began to draw. Alice, forgetting her momentary humiliation, moved a little closer between the shelves. "Do you draw?" From his position, he could see that the strokes were smooth and deliberate. Belle was taking his time. He was completely relaxed, his brow slightly furrowed with concentration. "I didn't know it did that," Alice whispered. And for some reason, that image seemed strangely warm to him. Not just attractive, but beautiful, calm, warm. Like someone who found peace in the little things. He put aside the notebook where he was writing things down and just stared at it. Her smile was gentle. The way she held the pen, the way she tilted her head. Everything was different from what she had imagined about him. "Bellcranel, what else are you hiding?" She sighed softly and looked down at her notebook. And there, amidst notes about books, tastes, and coffee, she jotted down something new, almost without thinking. "He draws when no one is watching. He has his own world. I like the way he looks when he's drawing." And when she noticed what she had written, Alice remained silent. And then she smiled sheepishly. "This is more difficult than I thought." At the end of the day, when the corridors of the headquarters were beginning to empty and night was beginning to fall, Alicia went to spend time on the terrace. She had been looking for Belle all day, but after the library she didn't see him again. Cruz told her that he had gone with Lafia to the dungeon, so her investigation was now over. I couldn't find out much, he thought, letting out a sigh. The air was fresh, moving her long hair from side to side. The sky was a beautiful color between orange and purple from the sunset, creating a beautiful view. But even so, Alicia wasn't on that terrace by chance. Raul had told him that Belle used to visit that place in the afternoons, that it was already something normal for him. He says it helps him think, she recalled the boy saying before he left. She only went to the terrace to rest and also to verify if what Raul told her was true. And he was not wrong. As he tilted his neck upward slightly, there he was. Bellcranel. Seated atop the highest roof of the headquarters, one leg stretched out and the other bent, his arm resting on his knee, his face tilted toward the sky. His white hair moved gently in the breeze. The expression on his face was serene, with a faint trace of nostalgia, as if he were recalling a dream he didn't want to let go of. And as was obvious, he hadn't noticed the elf's presence. He was lost in his own world. Alicia watched him silently from the shadows cast by one of the stone columns. She didn't dare interrupt. I felt that if I said anything, I would ruin the moment, whatever he was thinking. He had no book in his hands. Nor food, nor his cup of tea or his notebook in his hands. I was just there watching. Alicia lowered her head slightly, her hands clasped in front of her, as if afraid her breathing might disturb him. There was a gentleness in Belle that she hadn't noticed before. The calmness. A quiet sadness, the kind one only feels when they've learned to live with their own wounds. What do you think about when you're alone? Alice whispered to herself, her voice barely an echo in the breeze. Would you remember anyone? Would I dream about something? Or did he simply enjoy the silence because it was his only way to be completely at peace? Belle was a complete enigma to her. Suddenly, Belle moved slightly. He turned his head slowly, as if he had sensed a presence. Alicia held her breath. He quickly hid behind the stone column, pressing his back against it and closing his eyes for a second. His heart was beating strongly. Had I seen her before? Or was it just a coincidence? She could hear Belle climb down from the roof and start walking toward her. Alicia couldn't move. She was definitely going to look like a stalker, especially since she hid. If she had stayed in the same place without moving, she would have been less suspicious. From now on everyone would know her as Alicia the stalker. Her reputation was ruined. But then a voice rang out. Hello, he asked gently. It wasn't a voice as if he was sure someone was there, more like he was calling out in case someone was there. In short, he didn't see her, he only felt her presence. She did not answer. He just waited. He wouldn't come out. What excuse would she give? She was terrible at lying. He would notice her lie in a matter of seconds and realize she was spying on him. And all for a gift. If he had gotten Aki or Raul, he wouldn't be doing all this. A few seconds passed in which Belle said nothing, only the sounds of birds could be heard. Finally, the footsteps slowly faded away. And then, the creak of the door closing behind him signaled that he had left the terrace. Alicia exhaled very slowly, as if releasing a great burden. She waited a few more moments to see if it would return, but it didn't. Then he came out of his hiding place. His boots echoed softly against the stone floor as he approached the edge of the terrace again where he could see Belle. He paused for a moment, looking towards where Belle's figure had disappeared. There was no one there. And then he climbed onto the roof and sat down. In the same spot where he had been just minutes before. The roof was still slightly warm, as if it held the presence of someone who had just left. From there, the view was breathtaking. Orange rooftops, long shadows, some lights already coming on in Arario, and beyond, the faint glow of the Tower of Babel. Alicia crossed her arms on her legs, resting her cheek against her knee. You're not as simple as I thought, he whispered, observing the horizon with a calm expression. Belle was kind and cheerful. Yes, I already knew that. But there was something else too. The quiet introspective side. Something he didn't easily show. As if a part of him was always wandering among memories and thoughts he didn't share with anyone. In just 2 days I had seen more of him than in all those years. Later. At night, when the moon was at its highest point, it was a sign that night had fallen. Alicia sat cross-legged on her bed, wrapped in a light blanket. The breeze that drifted in through the window carried the scent of nighttime gardens, and the soft rustling of branches helped maintain the silence, a comfortable silence, one that allowed for thought. In front of her, clutched in her hands, was her small notebook. It wasn't fancy at all. The covers were simple, a little worn at the corners, but it held something precious. It was where she kept all her private thoughts, little reflections, or things she wanted to remember. It was her secret diary of emotions, and now, it had become the official notebook for solving the bellcranel case. With a pen in her hand and a focused expression, she wrote in neat and delicate handwriting. Books about heroes. I likes old stories. I gets very engrossed in reading. He laughs, tenses up, and gets excited. I seeks inspiration. The evenings on the terrace. I goes alone. I doesn't talk to anyone. I observes the sky, the horizon. He gets lost in his thoughts. Perhaps he's looking for something he lost. Or someone. Secret drawings. I doesn't tell anyone. It draws while reading or when relaxed. I sift, careful strokes. Things with sentimental value. I take the little details seriously. I didn't value what's expensive, value what's meaningful. I something handmade. Attentive, kind, solitary. I laughs with everyone, but rarely talks about himself. I doesn't like to draw attention to himself, but people notice him anyway. I seem strong, but there's a part of him that's very lonely. When she finished writing, Alicia put the pen down on the small table, sighing deeply, as if she had just released an invisible weight. She stared at the list in silence. Her eyes scanned each line as if searching for a hidden clue, a secret map to guide her to the answer she needed. He slowly leaned back on his pillow, still holding the notebook, and his eyes settled on the last piece of information. Attentive, kind, solitary. She gently bit her lower lip, thoughtfully. Elle wasn't like the other boys in the family. He wasn't like Bet, who shouted every time something bothered him. He wasn't like Rawl, who always tried to hide his nervousness. Nor like Finn, who had that air of a serene and wise leader. Elle was warm, quiet, full of things he didn't show. Alicia sat down again. Her eyes now shone with a faint golden gleam in the moonlight. She looked at her notebook and, as if speaking directly to him, whispered. "What kind of gift can I give someone like you?" It remained silent for a few seconds, with the wind caressing the curtains and the distant sound of crickets accompanying the night. I didn't want to give her something generic. I didn't want to buy her something just because it sounded nice. That wasn't the point. I didn't know why, but I wanted to give her something special, something unique. Bellcranel, he repeated his name in a soft voice. She looked down, touching the list with her fingertips, and for a moment her cheeks turned a faint pink. "I want to give you something you'll never forget." The words escaped without her fully thinking them through. And yet they were true. Truer than she wanted to admit. There was a brief silence as they thought of a solution. And then, Alice looked up at the starry sky that she could see through the window. And she smiled. Not a nervous smile. But a small, determined smile. The idea for the gift was already beginning to take shape. "I think I have an idea." And with that, a different heartbeat. End of chapter. Chapter 4. The following morning dawned peacefully at the Loki family headquarters. In the garden of the headquarters, the aroma of flowers was in the air and the gentle breeze moved the leaves, creating a very relaxing atmosphere. There, under one of the tallest trees, one that offered the perfect shade, was Bell. The white-haired young man sat cross-legged, his expression serene. His gaze wasn't fixed on the garden, nor on the closed book beside him, but on a small, folded piece of paper nestled between the pages of his notebook. The same piece of paper he had taken the day it all began. She took it out slowly, as if afraid of tearing the paper. She unfolded it carefully. It only had one name written on it, but it was enough to send a nervous flutter through her stomach. Alicia Forestlight, he murmured softly, the name that had occupied his thoughts for the past 3 days. A small smile appeared on her face, although she was more nervous. "How ironic, we've been in the same family for years and we've never exchanged a word," she said softly. Always so close, yet also so far away. The image of Alicia came vividly to him. Her golden hair cascading like a glittering waterfall over her shoulders, her elven ears peeking out proudly, and that intelligent gaze that seemed to see more than it revealed. He remembered seeing her many times, though always from a distance. At family gatherings, at training sessions, on outings to the dungeon. Always in the company of Aki, Lafia, or some other girls, and always radiating that serene elegance which, in her case, didn't seem forced, but natural. "She has a presence that's hard to describe," he said softly. "Strong, yet calm, and she also seems like someone who knew her stuff, like a disciple of Miss Riveria." Elle looked down at the slip of paper again. "What can I give to someone like that?" It wasn't a superficial question. He wasn't the type to buy just anything to comply with a rule. He didn't like that. Especially not when it involved someone like Alicia. "I knew, just by looking at her, that she wouldn't be happy with an empty, meaningless gift. I could tell from the way she listened attentively to her friends, from how she observed the details of everything around her. She seemed to be one of those people who valued the symbolic, the things made with intention. Something special for her," he repeated, and then sighed deeply. He picked up his notebook and slowly opened it, searching for one of the back pages. There were notes about missions, drawings of monsters, and random sketches he made when he needed to clear his mind. He even had a few drawings of some family members like Tiona and Tyan, Finn or Ace. Yesterday he tried to draw Alice, but he never had a clear image in his mind. That made it difficult for him. "First, I need to get to know her better without being obvious," he told himself, leaning back against the tree trunk. Maybe I can ask Aki or Miss Riveria something. Surely one of them can help me with this. She thought about it for a moment longer, closing her eyes, listening to the soft sound of the wind through the leaves. And then, without knowing why, she smiled. I never thought a game like this would make me think so much or make me want to meet someone for real. She carefully placed the paper inside the notebook and gently closed it, as if she were keeping an important secret. I had already decided. I would investigate her a little. Hours later. It was a little after noon in the city of Arario, with the sun at its highest point. It was one of those times of day when training activity began to slow down in the Loki family, and the group members took the opportunity to relax, read, or simply wander the halls looking for conversation or some pastime. Elle walked with an apparently calm expression down one of the corridors. Her pace was slow, her hands in her pockets, and her gaze distant, although inside, her mind was a whirlwind of nerves. After all, he was about to investigate things about a girl he'd never exchanged words with, and he didn't want to seem like a weirdo. It's just a casual chat, he repeated to himself. Nothing suspicious. Nothing strange. She would only talk to Aki. She had been her friend since she joined the family. She wouldn't think anything strange about him, or at least that's what she wanted to believe. A normal chat between friends and gathering information. After a few minutes, he finally spotted Aki leaving the dining room, speaking briefly with Tiona and saying goodbye to her. At that moment he knew he couldn't wait any longer. He took a breath, approached her casually, and greeted her with a smile. Hey Aki. Do you have a moment? The catgirl turned her face toward him, surprised at first. Her ears twitched slightly, and her long tail swayed gently as she gazed at him curiously. Elle? He said, raising an eyebrow before smiling. Hi. Can I help you with something? Belle laughed nervously, rubbing the back of her neck. I just thought we could go for a little walk. You know, to stretch our legs afterward. Aki tilted her head slightly, examining him as if trying to read his true intentions. That sounds suspiciously planned. He smiled mischievously. I know we're good friends, Belle, but inviting me for a walk out of the blue? Are you up to something? No, not at all. He said quickly, nervously. I just wanted to chat for a while. About unimportant things. You say trivial things. Aki narrowed her eyes, amused. And does that include looking at me like you're hiding something? Me? Never. Aha, I see where this is going. Aki crossed her arms and smiled with amusement. This is all very suspicious. Are you trying to get something out of me? She asked, seeing Belle getting more nervous. I mean, I'm not interested in having a relationship with anyone, but I really like you, and you're one of the best looking in the family. I say, let's give it a try. Belle's face turned bright red upon hearing those words. As Aki saw his reaction, she began to laugh loudly, making the rabbit even more embarrassed. Haha, relax Belle, I'm just kidding, he laughed, patting him on the back. It's always fun to embarrass you. It's not funny, Belle stammered nervously. It was always the same with Aki. For some reason, every time he had the chance, he would play those kinds of pranks on him, and he always succeeded in his goal, which was to embarrass him. But even so, this whole walker is suspicious. Confess, Belle. Are you interested in some girl and looking for a spy to give you information? He asked, raising an eyebrow in amusement. Belle choked slightly on his own saliva, blushing again. And no. Well, not like that exactly, he stammered, looking away. Aki observed him closely. Her smile widened. There it is, she said, amused. You don't have to say it. It's obvious. Obvious? The girl from the family was chosen as your secret friend and you're seeking my great advice. Belle remained silent for a few seconds. Aki was one of the few who could guess what he was thinking. The other two were Loki and Lafia. Yes, he finally confessed, lowering his voice. Aki let out a soft laugh upon hearing that answer. I knew it. That look of confusion mixed with social anxiety is classic in these games. After all, you're not the first one to come looking for my advice, she said with a proud smile. I'll give you the help you need. Thank you. You're welcome. They both continued walking while the silence settled for a moment, only interrupted by footsteps on the ground. So Ellis? Aki asked, now in a more relaxed tone. Belle nodded slightly. Aki didn't need to think much about which girl it was. After all, Belle was very friendly with almost all the girls. There were only a few with whom he hadn't exchanged words, among them Alicia, and being his friend, it was obvious that he would seek her help. She's always been distant to me, the albino murmured. But ever since I saw her name on that piece of paper, I haven't been able to stop thinking that I really don't know anything about her. And if I'm going to give her a gift, I want to do it right. Something that will mean something to her. Aki glanced at him sideways. The young man was speaking sincerely, that much was clear. He wasn't like those foolish adventurers who let themselves be swayed by appearances or the excitement of a week. There was something more to his tone, something honest. He was happy that Alicia had chosen him as her secret friend. In fact, it was even fun since they would both be giving each other gifts and he couldn't wait to see their reactions when the day came. Okay, I'll tell you, he said with a smile. But on one condition. One condition. I want a box of chocolate cookies. The ones they make at that shop near the East District, the ones that come in different shapes. Belle blinked. That's all. With double chocolate, she said excitedly as her tail wagged. Made. Great. Now listen carefully, future sugar supplier. They stopped near one of the open windows overlooking the central garden. Aki leaned against a frame as he spoke, his tone lower but still just as animated. Meanwhile, Belle stood in front of her waiting to hear all the details. Alicia is very special, but she doesn't show it easily, she began. She's always been quiet, reserved, as if she's always thinking about something else. But behind that, there's a very sensitive heart. She's very observant. And also, very honest. If she likes something, she shows it. If she doesn't, she shows that too. She's not one to say she likes something when she really doesn't. I figured as much, Belle said, crossing his arms. He loves nature. Whenever he has a free moment, he spends it outside. He likes to read in the shade, exercise with the wind blowing nearby, or simply sit under a tree writing. He doesn't do it out of habit. He needs it. Writes. Yes, although hardly anyone sees her do it. She does it in small notebooks, made with sturdy leaves from a tree in her homeland. She prepares the leaves herself. She once showed me how she does it. It's quite an art. Belle listened with rapt attention. Each word gave him a new, much more special image of Alicia. And books. Is there one you particularly like? Elven mythology. Ancient poetry. Tales of travel and explorers. Anything with a hint of history, of something lost or ancestral. It's as if she's searching for something of herself in them, as if deep down she wants to feel close to her forest, though she doesn't show it. I know she misses her home. Belle smiled, looking down. But that sounds very nice. She is. When she talks about the customs of her forest, you can always see the happiness in her eyes. She's tender. Belle imagined that image for a moment, and although she only imagined it, it was beautiful. Do you like handmade objects? He asked curiously. Very much so. Once, Lafia gave her a bookmark with dried elven flowers. She still uses it to this day. And it's not because she needs it. It's because she values it. Belle nodded slowly, reflecting. Thank you, Aki. This helps me more than you can imagine, she said gratefully, now knowing more about that mysterious elf in her eyes. The cat smiled broadly. You owe me my cookies. Don't forget. I promise. Aki looked at him for a few more seconds, assessing. Then she nodded with satisfaction. To be honest, I think Alicia likes you, even if she doesn't say so. Maybe she just needed a reason to notice. Belle was a little surprised. Do you really believe that? Of course. You can clearly see it in her eyes when she doesn't like someone, and that look isn't there when she sees you, she said with a smile as she started walking away from him again. And you seem quite curious about her too. I hope you give her a nice gift, and who knows, maybe you'll become good friends. Belle stayed put for a moment, watching Aki walk away with her tail twitching slightly. He put a hand to his pocket, gently squeezing the edge of the notebook he was carrying. Now I have a clearer idea, now I can begin, she thought with a slight smile. And with that thought, he began to walk with renewed energy, as if this walk had finally cleared the path to something more than just a simple game. I was getting to know that mysterious elf. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set and painted the sky gold, Bellcranel decided that asking others was no longer enough. He needed to see it with his own eyes. It wasn't just out of curiosity, though I didn't want to fully admit it. I wanted to understand her. To understand her a little better. With some papers in hand, pretending to be busy, he strolled calmly through the corridors of the second floor of the Loki family headquarters. His true destination was a west-facing window of the headquarters, from where he could see the entire back garden, the stone paths, the rose bushes, and the benches beneath the trees. When he arrived, he approached cautiously. He didn't want to be noticed. He peeked out slowly, and there he was. Alicia Forestlight. He saw her walking among the bushes, with a book in one hand and a magic wand in the other. It was the wand she always trained with Riveria. The garden seemed to fall silent around her. Everything felt calmer, as if the place itself were watching her. Belle leaned against the window frame. He looked at her calmly. She paused for a moment, read a passage from her book in a low voice, and pointed her staff toward the sky. She spoke a few words in Elvish. Her voice was soft, like a song dissolving into thin air. A spark of light floated around her, shining for a second before vanishing. From what I had heard, all elves had a little magic even if they didn't have fauna. They were the only race that could have one without the help of a god, perhaps that was one of the reasons why the vast majority of them were very conceited. Then Alice took out a small notebook and began to write. Her movements were careful, as if everything she did had a purpose. Belle smiled, admiring her. Not because of how beautiful she was, though she undoubtedly was, but because of her way of being in the world. There was something about the way she moved, the way she read, the way she spoke to the wind, something that made him want to know her better. "It's not just that she likes nature," he murmured. "It's as if she's part of it." Then Alicia sat down on a bench under a tree and closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, letting the wind move her hair. For a moment, she simply lay there, at peace. And Belle felt a slight knot in his chest. It was a feeling difficult to explain. As if looking at her like that made him feel closer. More connected. Then she stood up again and approached a bush with purple flowers. She bent down gently and carefully ran her fingers over one of the flowers. "They're similar to the ones that grew near home," she whispered with a small, almost invisible smile. Belle didn't fully understand, but he grasped the sentiment. Her gaze held a touch of nostalgia, but also a great deal of affection. And then he understood. Alicia wasn't cold or distant. She was just calm. She lived at her own pace. A slower, more natural one. She noticed things that others overlooked. And that's what made her special. Belle lowered his head slightly and closed his eyes, letting the wind caress his face. For a moment, he too felt part of that garden. As if he were sharing that moment with her, even though she didn't know it. When she looked again, Alicia was already packing her things and walking away along a stone path. She walked unhurriedly, as if time never pressed her. Belle watched her until she disappeared through a side door. Then, she looked at the purple flowers she had touched. "I'm getting a clearer idea every day," she whispered with a smile. And he walked away with confident steps, an idea growing in his mind. It was no longer just a game for him. That was turning into something more. End of chapter. Chapter 5. Why can't I stop thinking about that person? The days in Arario continued their course, with their usual hustle and bustle, missions coming and going, and the constant flow of adventurers traversing the city. But within the Loki Familia's headquarters, something small and unexpected had begun to blossom. The game of Secret Friends, which at first was nothing more than a fun dynamic to strengthen camaraderie, had begun to be something different. Because for bellcranel and Alicia Forestlight, that innocent game was becoming an excuse. An excuse to observe each other without being discovered. An excuse to notice those small details that previously went unnoticed. An excuse to really start getting to know each other. It was a quiet morning at the Loki family headquarters. The breeze rustled gently through the garden trees, carrying the scent of freshly watered flowers. The leaves swayed peacefully, and the sky was clear, a sign that it would be another perfect day. Alice sat on a stone bench in the shade of a large tree, an open book in her hands. Her crossed legs and elegant posture gave the impression of peaceful reading. But if one looked closely. "I hadn't turned the page in the last 5 minutes." "What are you doing?" he murmured very quietly, while surreptitiously scratching his eyebrow, pretending to concentrate on his reading. Without moving his head too much, he raised his gaze slightly above the edge of the book, as if looking over some trenches. There, in the training yard not far away, was Belle. He wore an open jacket, already half unbuttoned due to the heat. His white shirt was slightly damp with sweat from exertion, clinging lightly to his torso. His white hair was tousled by the breeze, and he held a wooden sword in his hand. He trained alongside Raul and Cruz, exchanging quick coordinated movements. "He's agile," thought Alice as she slowly lowered the book and pretended to turn the page, though she hadn't even read the previous lines. "His steps are clean and steady. He has good swordsmanship and..." Her eyes lingered on something else. That smile of hers. It wasn't arrogant. It wasn't boastful. It was a calm, warm smile. As if, despite the effort, she was truly enjoying it. "Why are you smiling like that?" the elf whispered to herself, without looking away. And then, as if her heart were betraying her, she noticed her cheeks begin to heat up at the sight of his torso. It's just part of the observation. Observation, nothing more. Knowledge-gathering techniques. Field research. He covered himself lightly with the book as if it were a shield. Completely professional. "Elle, watch out," shouted Cruz, pointing at a decorative palm tree planted on Loki's whim months ago. The coconut, yes, a real coconut, fell hard from high above right on Belle's head. "Ah." He let out with a dry, confused sound, falling hard to the ground as the coconut bounced to one side. There was a moment of silence. And then. I'm fine, she exclaimed with a nervous smile as she rubbed her bump. Well, the boogeyman managed what you couldn't." Raul and Cruz ran to help him, laughing. Cruz picked up the coconut and looked at it in disbelief. "Who plants a coconut palm in a training yard?" "Loki," Raul replied resignedly. Meanwhile, from her corner of the garden, Alice put a hand to her mouth to stifle a laugh. Not because she was mocking them, but because there was something about the whole scene that she found enchanting. He's definitely clumsy, she thought, her eyes sparkling slightly. But it's kind of cute. At that moment, a familiar and mocking voice broke his harassment, his investigation. It looks great from here. Aki called out as she walked by, carrying a container of fresh fruit. She stopped right next to Alicia, raising an eyebrow mischievously. Are you admiring the fall or something else? Belle's abs look great from here. Alice was startled, hiding her face with the book as if she had suddenly become invisible. And no. I was just reading. And you should stop spying on what I'm doing. She replied in a low but annoyed voice, blushing to her ears. Reading. Aki squinted to look at the book. Isn't it the same paragraph from half an hour ago when I passed by here? I was just thinking about the context. Exclaimed Alice, still hiding behind the book. Aki let out a mischievous laugh. Of course, of course. Don't worry, it's completely normal. Love makes us stalkers from time to time, especially if you're an elf. Shut up. Alicia shouted, hitting him on the arm. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Aki added with a laugh as she continued on her way. But if you want another vantage point, I recommend the second floor window. A direct view, and you'll be able to see it perfectly. You sound like you've already done it. Haha, yes, but the difference is that I'm not ashamed to admit it, she said, winking. Goodbye. Alicia watched her walk away, muttering something under her breath, still blushing. She picked up the book again, but this time she didn't pretend to read. She only allowed herself to look for a few more seconds at that white-haired boy who was now laughing with his classmates, still rubbing his head. And for some reason, that laugh made her heart beat a little faster. Silly, she whispered sweetly. Why do you make it so hard for me to concentrate? But deep down, it didn't bother him at all. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the headquarters later on. The second floor hallway was quiet at that time of day. Most people were leaving the building or spending time in their rooms. Sitting on a wooden bench was Belle, drying his sweat with a towel after an intense workout. His hair was a little disheveled, still damp from the exertion. Beside him, Lafia calmly leafed through a spellbook, though she seemed more interested in watching Belle than in what she was reading. She held a half-finished fruit juice in her hand and wore a curious expression on her face. Without saying anything, he extended his other hand towards Belle with a bottle of water. Here, hydrate yourself, he offered. Thank you, Lafia, he replied with a somewhat tired smile. He took a sip and let out a quiet breath. But then he noticed the elf was still watching him, her eyes narrowed as if she were studying him. Is something wrong? He asked. You look strange, she finally said, closing the book without bothering to mark the page. For days now you've been like you're in another world. It's not that you're the most level-headed person around, but lately you seem more distracted than usual. Belle blinked, surprised. How strange. Like you've been thinking a lot about something or someone, she added with a smile, though seconds later she felt a little embarrassed by what she was about to say. And now that I mention it, could it be that you've fallen in love? Belle almost choked on the water. What? Why is everyone jumping to that conclusion so quickly? He shouted, as Raul and Cruz had both said the same thing. Ah. So you are. Exclaimed Lafia as she leaned towards him with a mixture of excitement. I knew something strange was wrong with you. I didn't say that. Belle covered her face with a towel, not wanting him to notice her embarrassment. I've just been thinking about someone lately, that's all. Lafia put her juice aside and looked at him more closely. His smile was no longer just mocking. There was affection and genuine interest in his gaze. After all, Belle was her friend. One of the few she could talk to without feeling insecure, if not the only one. Thinking about, he insisted in a softer voice. Belle lowered the towel, sighed, and stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then, he spoke. And a person who I find more interesting than I thought. She's calm, very focused, almost as if nothing bothers her. But I feel there's something more beneath that calm. As if she has a whole hidden world, one that no one has yet discovered. Lafia listened in silence, without interrupting. The way Belle said it wasn't just admiration. There was tenderness in his words. Genuine curiosity. And that faint smile that formed on his face gave him away completely. So he couldn't help it. You're talking about Alicia, right? She asked with a calm smile, although inside she already knew the answer. Belle remained still. How did you know? She said in a low voice. The same way everyone knows, Lafia replied with a soft chuckle. You've been watching her all the time. In the dining hall, in the hallways, at practice. And not just watching her, but trying to memorize every detail about her. Belle clutched the towel in his hands and lowered his head, completely flushed. Am I that obvious? No more than her, Lafia added with a touch of pride. Alice watches you too. She gets lost in the garden just as you're training. And she always happens to choose the books that are in the same section as you in the library. Belle opened his eyes in surprise. She too. Yes. He may not say it, but it's noticeable. And you should notice it more too, Lafia added. Something strange is going on. Belle remained silent for a while, processing everything. Then he smiled, albeit somewhat shyly, as talking about these kinds of topics wasn't his thing. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she finally confessed. "It's like I want to get closer, but I freeze up. We're not close. We haven't spoken. I'm afraid to say something and ruin it." Lafia looked at him tenderly. "Alicia may seem very serious, but she's not difficult to talk to if you're honest. I assure you she won't hit you. They told me the same thing about Bet," Belle muttered, pointing to his right eye. "And I ended up with this bruise for a week." Lafia frowned as she remembered that day. "That stinking wolf. If I were stronger than him, I'd beat the crap out of him for what he did to you. You flea-ridden idiot," he exclaimed, throwing small punches in the air. Belle laughed harder this time. These were the kinds of moments he appreciated most about having Lafia around. With her, he could talk without worry. He could relax. She was like the sister he never had. "Thank you, Lafia. Really. You always make me feel calmer." "That's what friends are for," she replied with a proud smile, before starting to drink her juice. As Belle looked towards the hallway, towards the place where she was probably at that moment, reading or practicing in silence. And as he was lost in that thought, an idea crossed his mind. "I have to do this gift right," he thought, slightly clenching his fist. Belle smiled with more determination. And for the first time, instead of feeling nervous about seeing her, he felt a real desire to take the first step. The next day, at the library. The morning sun streamed into the library through the tall windows. The air smelled of old paper, ink, and wood, and a tranquility pervaded the space unlike anything else in the building. Alicia sat at a table far away, near a corner in the second row of the reading room. She had chosen that spot carefully, not for its lighting or its quietness, but because from there she had a perfect view to the back of the room and to that specific table where he used to sit. She would never again sit in Loki's risque section. In front of her lay a heavy book on alchemy, open to the eye. The small print and arcane symbols were visible. Her hand held the page by the corner, but she didn't turn it. She had been stuck on the same paragraph for almost 5 minutes, her brow barely furrowed, feigning interest. "Just a glance," he told himself mentally, slightly lowering his gaze from the book. And there it was. Bellcranel. He sat at his usual table, his notebook open in front of him and a pencil in his hand. He wore a light white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and a calm expression on his face. He seemed completely absorbed in what he was doing. Alicia watched him carefully, without moving. Her heart was beating a little faster than normal, but she forced herself to breathe calmly. "Porque se vi tan tranquilo siempre. Penso con curiosidad y una pequeña sonrisa escondida." It wasn't the first time she'd looked at him like that. She'd passed by that library many times just to see him for a couple of minutes. And each time, without quite knowing why, that image of Belle silently drawing gave her a feeling of peace. But that day was different. Alicia had arrived with a clear idea. She wanted to talk to him. At least say hello, maybe ask a question. Something small, a step. However, as soon as she walked in and saw him there, all the courage she had mustered began to dissolve like sugar in coffee, so she did what she always did. Sit down and look at him. "I'll probably just look at him from afar again," he told himself with a mixture of resignation. And at that moment, as I watched him once more, it happened. Belle looked up. And his eyes met hers. They both stood still. Motionless. Time seemed to stop, although it was only for a few seconds. Alicia felt her heart leap, as if she'd been caught in the act of mischief. Belle froze too, motionless, his gaze fixed on the green eyes of the elf who, until that moment, had always seemed so distant. An eternal second. And then, as if their bodies reacted at the same time, they both abruptly looked away. Alice hid behind her alchemy book, raising it to her face, as if that could make her invisible. Her face was burning, and she wasn't even sure she could read with her hands trembling so badly. He saw me. He saw me looking at him. She thought nervously, almost wanting to sink into her chair. She had been discovered in her harassment and her investigation. Elle, meanwhile, had slammed her notebook shut. Her cheeks were red, and the pencil in her hand was now whirling rapidly between her fingers, as if she were trying to distract herself. Was she looking at me? Was she really? Does that confirm what Lafia said? He thought agitatedly, lowering his gaze and feeling nervous. A few seconds of silence passed. They both tried to go back to what they were doing. Alicia pretended to read, Belle pretended to draw. But the feeling remained in the air. That slight tremor in her chest. That warmth that wouldn't go away. And then, slowly, without quite knowing why, they both looked up again. Their eyes met once more, this time more slowly. As if they wanted to make sure it wasn't a mistake. That the other was really still there, watching, feeling the same. They didn't look away. They didn't even speak. They didn't even greet each other. They just looked at each other for a few more seconds. Until, as if the moment spoke for itself, they both smiled faintly. A sincere, shy smile, shared silently. And then, a small laugh escaped their lips. It wasn't loud, nor awkward. Just a sigh disguised as laughter, a way of saying I saw you, without needing words. A simple moment. Small. But full of something important. Something they didn't yet know how to name. A moment that, without realizing it, made them feel closer. As if that game of secret friends no longer had so much to do with chance. As if, little by little, something real was beginning. That night, at the Loki family headquarters. Silence had taken over the corridors. The lights were low, and only the soft moonlight filtered through the windows. Outside, the wind moved the tree branches gently, as if it didn't want to bother anyone. In her room, Alicia sat on her bed, legs crossed, a light blanket draped over her shoulders. Her small notebook lay open to a blank page on her lap. She held a pen in her hand, but hadn't written anything in the last few minutes. I was looking at the page without really seeing the lines. Her gaze was lost. His mind was elsewhere. It's not just the gift anymore, is it? She whispered to herself, breaking the silence in the room. She rested her elbow on her knee and her cheek on her hand, her expression thoughtful. Belle's face appeared in her mind unbidden. That kind expression he used to have, his relaxed way of walking, the way he smiled when talking to someone or when something made him happy. That natural, warm aura that always surrounded him. She remembered how he had chuckled softly that afternoon in the library, when their eyes met. Such a simple moment, yet it had stirred something in her chest. It's not perfect, Alice murmured, playing with the corner of her notebook. But it doesn't have to be. She didn't know him completely. She didn't know all his dreams, his fears, or his deepest stories. But every day, every little detail she discovered made her want to know more. To get closer. To understand him. To know him not as a colleague, but as someone important. Her fingers moved across the page, still unwritten. She didn't know what words to use. She didn't know how to put into words what she felt in her chest. She sighed, leaning back against the pillow. And as she did, her gaze drifted toward the window. The moon was full, bright, beautiful. A silvery gleam was reflected in her green eyes, which now looked softer, almost dreamy. And without her knowing. In another room, not far from his. Belle was also awake. He lay on his back on his bed, his sketchbook open beside him, a small lamp softly illuminating the room. The air was still, broken only by the gentle rustling of the trees in the breeze. That night I hadn't drawn any flowers. No landscapes. Neither weapons, nor dungeon monsters. He had drawn some eyes. Serene, beautiful, and deep eyes. A tranquil green. Eyes he had seen many times from afar, but that day, for the first time, had been right in front of his own without barriers. He closed the notebook slowly and stared at the ceiling, with his arms behind his head. I no longer just want to impress her with a gift, he said softly, with a slight, sincere smile. I want to understand her. It had all started as a curiosity. A simple desire to do well in the game. But now, there was something more. A different desire. More real. I wanted to know why he was always looking at the flowers in the garden. Why did she sometimes seem distracted, as if her mind wandered elsewhere? I wanted to know which was her favorite story. What things scared her, what things made her feel safe. I wanted to know who she really was. She sighed softly, closing her eyes for a few seconds. And when she opened them, she looked out the window of her room, right where the moon was. The same moon. The same light that at that moment also illuminated Alicia's face. Both of them looking towards the night. Towards the same sky. Both thinking about the same person. Without knowing it. Without admitting it yet. But feeling it. Deep inside the chest. Because the secret friends game had long since taken a back seat. This was no longer a game. Now it was something that was slowly growing. Something that didn't yet have a name. But it was there. Firm. Vivo. Real. End of chapter. Chapter 6. As if they were synchronized, Belle and Alicia each let out a sigh in their respective rooms, their voices barely audible in the night silence. I finally finished, they whispered at the same time, unaware that they shared that same phrase, that same feeling of relief, and a slight smile on their faces reflected the satisfaction of the effort completed. It was night in the city of Arario. The streetlights were slowly beginning to dim, closed windows offered glimpses of shadows moving beyond them, and a gentle breeze caressed the rooftops. Most people were already resting in their homes, seeking to regain their energy for the next day. But that was not the case for Belle and Alicia, who had spent the entire night in complete silence and concentration, preparing something very special. Just because. Tomorrow was the decisive day. The long-awaited day of gift-giving, the day when the game proposed by Loki, which began to unite the family, would end. 7 days had passed since the game began. 7 days in which all or almost all of the family was busy, searching, researching, brainstorming, and designing the perfect gift for their secret friend. And while they were searching, The elf and the rabbit just watched each other. From that day in the library, when their eyes met, something invisible yet powerful had been born between them. They didn't quite know what it was, but they knew it was real. Now, they were aware of every glance. Every time their eyes met in the distance, in the dining room, in the courtyard, in the hallways, they both lowered their gaze shyly, but always with a slight smile, as if that moment filled them with an inexplicable warmth. It was strange. They had never exchanged a word in their entire lives, not a hello, not a good morning, not even a simple formal introduction. And yet, with just a few glances, they felt they were getting closer. That they were getting to know each other. A glance. A smile. Small gestures that might go unnoticed by others, but meant everything to them. And of course, the closest family members, especially the more observant or nosy ones, had noticed these small but constant interactions. Despite this, they kept their distance at least for a while. They couldn't help but watch everything with smirks, silently placing bets on when one of them would make the first move. They found it all thrilling. Although, of course, in Alicia's case, her friends' jokes were not lacking. "I saw you flirting with Belle. Going for one of the cutest boys in the family, not bad, Alicia. I can't believe you're capturing his attention with just a few glances. That's witchcraft. You like it. And no, that's not it. I just. And every time she received those taunts, Alice just stammered, her cheeks flushed, hiding her face behind a book she held in vain to cover herself. And of course, now, thanks to a certain traitor named Aki, everyone knew about her little observation routine in the library. You spend hours in the library when you know he goes there at that time. You're a stalker. Alicia wanted to sink into the ground every time she remembered it. However, she didn't regret it. Because thanks to that harassment, that silent investigation, she had been able to prepare the best gift she could have imagined for Belle. Something he, hopefully, would treasure. And the same could be said of Belle, who, although he was not as thorough in his search, with the little information he had obtained thanks to Aki and Lafia, had managed to think of a perfect gift for the beautiful elf with golden hair and eyes like emeralds. And now, after a week of glances and shy smiles, they were both sitting on their respective beds, in different rooms, holding in their hands a gift carefully wrapped in different ways, but with the same shared feeling. Wanting to make the person who would receive the gift happy. "I really hope she likes the gift." It was the whisper they both let out, looking at the moon with a smile from the window. So many investigations and small embarrassing moments leading up to the decisive day. It almost seemed as if they intended to confess, given how much they had prepared, when it was nothing like that. Just the desire to see that person smile. "I wonder what face she'll make when she sees the gift," Belle thought, letting himself fall back onto his bed. "I hope I don't seem weird because of my gift," thought Alice, hugging her pillow with a slight smile. But they were both sure of one thing. Tomorrow they would exchange words for the first time in their entire lives, and for some reason that made them anxious and nervous. The night was slowly progressing, but sleep did not come. They both tossed and turned in their beds, staring at the ceiling, the moon, the gift. As if their thoughts were a whirlwind that wouldn't let them rest. Belle sat on the bed and picked up the small package he had wrapped so carefully. It wasn't anything fancy, but he had made it with his own hands, and that was what mattered most to him. "What if she doesn't like it?" he whispered, scratching his head. "What if she thinks it's too simple?" He ran his fingers along the tape, adjusting it slightly, though it was already fine. Then he chuckled to himself, with that characteristic clumsy gesture of his. "Why am I so nervous?" She stared at the gift for a moment longer, and then she thought about his eyes. "And those green eyes that I had unintentionally drawn the night before. But I want her to like it. That's all," she murmured with a slight smile. "I just want her to feel happy, even if it's just a little." Meanwhile, in another room, Alicia hugged her pillow tightly, her face half hidden in the sheets. Her gift lay on the desk. The wrapping wasn't flashy, but it had carefully placed details. A simple ribbon and a small dried flower glued to the corner, a personal touch from her. "What if she thinks it's strange?" he murmured. "What if she thinks I tried too hard?" She stood up abruptly, went to the gift, and took it in her hands. She looked at it as if she were going to read an answer in it. She paced the room, from one side to the other, and then sighed. "No, this is what I wanted to give him. It's sincere. It doesn't matter what he thinks." She put the gift back in its place, sat down in front of the window and rested her chin on her knees, looking at the moon above. "Although it does matter," she admitted softly, with a shy smile. "Because I care about how he feels." They were both silent, each with their heart beating a little faster than normal. Without seeing each other, without hearing each other, yet somehow, in perfect harmony. Because that night, they hadn't just finished a gift. That night, they had also finally convinced themselves that that person, that look, that smile meant something more. Perhaps they didn't yet know what to call it. Perhaps they didn't even dare to think about it too much. But they did know one thing. Tomorrow they were going to talk for the first time. They were going to look at each other, this time up close. They were going to give each other those gifts they had kept so dearly. And without fully realizing it, they were about to take the first step towards something that had already begun with just a glance. And so, the long-awaited day for many has finally arrived. Perfectuo. Loki's enthusiastic shout echoed throughout the enormous hall, shattering any lingering tension in the air. The goddess stood on a small, makeshift stage, a low platform decorated with streamers, red and gold balloons, and a banner hanging behind her with crooked lettering that read Secret Santa Day, Sons of Their Mother. His smile was enormous, his arms raised to the sky, as if he were about to announce the biggest festival in Arario. Gathered before her were all the members of the Loki familia. Each held a gift bag or box, some with clumsy wrappings and others with ridiculously large bows. Excitement mingled with anxiety in the air. It was evident in their eyes, in the way some swayed from one foot to the other, or in the way others nervously clutched their gifts. Between them, located at opposite ends of the room, were Belle and Alicia. Although they seemed oblivious to the commotion, there was a palpable tension between them. Not out of dislike, but because of what they both knew. Their paths were likely to intertwine a little more that day. They glanced at each other out of the corner of their eyes, barely exchanging fleeting glances that were quickly cut short, as if afraid of being caught. Both remained motionless, but their hearts pounded. Perhaps it was nerves. Perhaps they wanted to listen carefully to their goddess's words. Or perhaps they were simply waiting for the right moment to approach, even if it was just by taking a step. Whatever the case, they both knew that something would change today. That today, even if only a little, the distance between them would shorten. "I see you're all carrying your gifts. That makes me happy and proud." Loki exclaimed energetically, crossing his arms as he watched his children take this big step. "For a moment I thought no one would care about this, that it would all just be an excuse to eat cake and get drunk, but thankfully that wasn't the case." A couple of laughs escaped from the crowd. "This will strengthen family bonds," she continued passionately. "I'm sure of it. This kind of thing is what makes us unique. A great family that not only fights together, but also laughs and celebrates." Even the family leaders, usually so serious and focused, showed slight smiles. Reveria kept her arms crossed, but her lips formed a subtle curve, as if she were silently enjoying the spectacle. Finn nodded slightly, his eyes half closed, observing everyone with a warm gaze. Gareth, for his part, chuckled softly, holding aloft a simple piece of paper carefully folded into 4 parts. "My gift will be the best of all, haha," she said with a confident smile, as she waved the paper as if it were a treasure. "The piece of paper? Is that really your gift?" Reveria asked, raising an eyebrow, clearly doubtful, while looking at him out of the corner of her eye. "Haha, it's not just any old piece of paper," Gareth replied, tapping the fold. "When the time comes, you'll see what I mean. I'm sure she'll love it." Reveria sighed, shaking her head, but couldn't help smiling a little more. "I just hope it's not a map to a beer warehouse," he remarked ironically. "And why not? That's a treasure too," laughed the dwarf, causing some nearby people to laugh with him. "But there's one more thing before we begin," Loki suddenly shouted, raising his hands to get everyone's attention, just as several people were starting to move to hand over their gifts. "We'll do it like the day the drawing was held." There was a faint murmur among many, like a wave of unease. "We'll call everyone up one by one to receive their gifts on stage. It'll be exciting. Everyone will see who got what." Many people's eyes widened when they heard that phrase. "What?" Aki exclaimed from a corner, her face completely pale. This wasn't part of the deal. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a box wrapped in shiny paper and clumsily secured with tape. Her nervousness was palpable. I didn't know it would be like this," Lafia murmured, clutching her gift to her chest. "This will be a disaster for the shy ones," one of the rookies was heard saying, already looking around for a door to escape through. Some began to murmur, shifting uncomfortably, while others laughed at the situation, clearly amused by the confusion. The mixture of anxiety and excitement was like a simmering storm about to erupt. "This will be embarrassing," said another in a choked voice, blushing just imagining it. "Don't complain. That'll only make it more exciting," Loki shouted excitedly. "That's why I told you to get a good present, so you don't look like a terrible friend in front of everyone. Ha 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 ha. Although, of course, it's up to the person whether they want to open it now or later. You're a monster." "Thank you." And right there. Amid Loki's jokes and some people's complaints, Elle and Alicia glanced nervously at each other again, as if they knew what that meant. Although when they made contact, their gazes quickly turned away. They're too obvious. How can they not realize they're going to give each other gifts? A couple of idiots, thought Bet, who inadvertently saw that exchange of glances. "Well then, get your hearts ready," Loki shouted, pointing to a large urn with names on it at the side of the stage. "We'll begin in a few minutes. I'll just give everyone time to breathe and accept their fate, haha." Some burst into nervous laughter, others pretended to hide behind their gifts. Nobody wanted to be first, or maybe they did. The murmur in the room grew, mingled with laughter, sighs, and knowing glances. Nerves were palpable. Bell swallowed hard as he gripped his box tighter. Alicia looked down, taking a deep breath, her cheeks barely flushed. The urn shone under the light in the room. The tension was palpable. Only one thing was missing. Very well. I think I've given you all plenty of time to calm down. Loki shouted excitedly. So let's begin. All eyes turned towards the urn. And the silence marked the end of the game. And the true beginning of it all. End of chapter. Chapter 7. And the time has come. Loki's enthusiastic shout made more than one person nervous, knowing that it would be embarrassing to give gifts in front of everyone, at least for the shyest among them. Elle and Alicia clutched their gifts as if mentally preparing themselves to see their secret friend's reaction. But first, I think it would be fair for Finn, Gareth and Riveria to be the first to give their gifts. After that, it will be random, said the goddess, looking at the three leaders of the family. Since they were used to always being in the public eye, they didn't feel nervous or anything like that. In fact, they thought it was fine because it would calm the nerves of the rest of the group a little. That sounds good to me, Riveria said calmly, taking a step forward with a small box. Everyone watched her expectantly, wondering what the princess of all the elves was going to give away. My secret friend is Lafia, said the mother of the family, looking at her apprentice with a slight smile. Lafia's face turned bright red when she heard what her teacher said. Was I going to receive a gift from Riveria? I couldn't believe it. Meanwhile, the high elf approached Lafia and with a warm smile, handed her the box. Here, Lafia. I chose it carefully. I hope you like it, she said in an almost maternal voice. Our Riveria Samati, thank you so much. Lafia exclaimed, her eyes welling with emotion. She clutched the box with both hands and hugged it tightly to her chest, as if it were an ancient treasure. Elfie, who was just a few steps away, couldn't help but lean towards Narvi and murmur with a mischievous smile. Come on, Lafia. Open it, we want to see what it is. Yes, don't be so selfish, Narvi added, giving him a light nudge. No. I'll open it in my room. Leave me alone. Lafia shouted nervously, turning her back on them while hiding the gift even more. DSK, how boring, huffed Elfie, though she couldn't help but smile at her friend's happiness. Riveria returned to her seat in silence, but with a serene expression she didn't often display. Loki watched her from his makeshift throne with a wide smile and a mischievous glint in his eye. And that's how you give a classy gift, guys. Take note, she said, laughing. My turn. Gareth exclaimed in a powerful voice, before Loki could even name him. The dwarf stood up enthusiastically and walked to the front with heavy, determined steps. He held a small folded piece of paper in his hands, which caused a murmur of confusion among those present. The piece of paper, is that your gift? Someone was heard saying in the crowd. Gareth didn't seem fazed. With a smile so wide it almost split his face, he held up the paper in front of everyone and waved it proudly. My secret friend is Ace Wallenstein. The blonde swordswoman, sitting quietly in a corner with a somewhat distant gaze, blinked slowly upon hearing her name. She looked up with a slight hint of surprise. Gareth approached him, still smiling, and handed him the paper as if it were a sacred contract. Here you go, young lady. I hope you enjoy it. Ace delicately took the paper, observing it without quite understanding what she expected to find. Is it a piece of paper? She whispered, somewhat bewildered. A piece of paper? Gareth, don't go too far. Tiona shouted indignantly from her seat. You can't just give Ace a piece of paper, and that's it. Relax, girl. It's not just any old piece of paper. Gareth defended himself, bursting into laughter. That's a coupon for all the Jag American you want for a whole month. I personally went to talk to the owner of that place she loves, and it's all sorted. Ace's eyes widened in shock upon hearing that, quickly looking at the paper and realizing that indeed, that was what it was. Don't go overboard. Seriously? She asked, her eyes sparkling. Haha. Of course, the best gift for the princess of the family. Riveria only shook her head slightly. She was trying to eliminate that taste in her adopted daughter, but Gareth was only increasing it. Thank you, Gareth, she said enthusiastically, preparing to run out of the headquarters. Wait, Ace Tan. You have to give your gift first before you leave. Loki shouted, causing the rock to stop abruptly. True. And so Ace returned to her post, eager to leave and claim her gift. I guess it's my turn. Finn stood up with a small, nervous smile on his face. His voice, though firm, held a slight tone of resignation. He walked to the center of the room as all eyes turned to him. Some, the more observant ones, noticed how his legs trembled slightly with each step. That was already a bad sign. My secret friend, as Finn began, but his voice trailed off, as if he regretted starting. The silence grew thick. Everyone stared at him expectantly. It's Finn said again, pressing his lips together. Come on, Finn, just say it already. Loki pleaded, his tone a mixture of amusement and annoyance. If you take any longer, Tiona will eat all the grape cakes before the game is over. Hey. I only ate 3. Tiona protested, her mouth full and her cheeks puffed out. Finn slapped his cheeks quickly, trying to calm himself, while murmuring something barely audible, as if repeating a mantra of courage. Finally, he let out a long, weary sigh, as if he could no longer escape his fate. My secret friend is Tyan. Yes. Tyan's scream echoed so loudly that several windows rattled, and Bet blurted out a curse word while covering her ears. Odds, woman. Are you trying to make me deaf? Exclaimed Gareth, frowning as he poured himself another beer. With a single leap, Tyan landed in front of the hobbit with such force that the wooden floorboards creaked. Her eyes gleamed with a dangerous intensity, like those of a wild beast that had just spotted its favorite prey. Finn, instinctively, took a step back. Let's go to his room so he can give me my present. The Amazon shouted, her cheeks flushed with excitement, a mixture of joy and other, less holy emotions. Her gaze held a predatory gleam, as if every inch of her body were screaming, my moment has arrived. Ahaha. You're so funny, Tyan. Finn laughed, his voice heavy with the forced laughter of someone who knows they're in danger. He quickly handed her a small box wrapped in gold paper. Here's your gift. Enjoy it, Tyan. I chose it carefully, I know you like it. Oh, Captain, she said, taking the box with a mischievous smile. I don't think I like it as much as you do. Ahaha, Merry Christmas, Tyan. Finn replied in a more hurried tone, already taking long strides towards his seat like someone fleeing an imminent explosion. Wait, Captain, at least open it with me. Tyan shouted excitedly, but he was already halfway to the table. I'm sure you'll appreciate it on your own. Tell me all about it later. He shouted over his shoulder without turning around. At least come and open something else in a more private place. A general burst of laughter erupted in the room as Finn slumped into his seat, exhaling as if he had just escaped death itself. Nice try, Captain, Reveria said with a sideways smile as he sipped his tea. Someday, Tyan whispered with a dreamy, determined expression as she stroked the wrapped box. Someday you'll fall, Finn Damon, I know it, and I'll give it to you like a drawer that won't close. A shiver ran down the hobbit's spine. Then she slowly returned to her seat, humming a loving melody as she hugged the gift to her chest, as if it were a sacred trophy. Loki watched everything from his place with a mischievous and excited smile. Great. Now that they've given their gifts, it's time for everything to be random. She shouted, eager to see everyone's gifts and reactions. Some sighed, mentally preparing themselves for what was about to happen. And so the real game began. Half an hour later. With so many people in the family, the game would take a little over an hour, but everyone had to admit that it was already starting to get exciting. Next. He shouted, plunging his hand into the urn as if it were a lottery of fate. Ooh. Bet. There was a brief silence. A collective gasp of oh no hung in the air. All eyes turned to the wolf, who was already frowning in annoyance. He rose from his seat with the air of someone going to the slaughter, muttering something under his breath as he scratched the back of his neck. He trudged to the center, carrying a plain bag, no ribbon, no wrapping paper, nothing. Just a practical black bag that looked like it came from an auto parts store, not a special occasion. Is that your gift? Elfie whispered to Narvi, raising an eyebrow. Maybe there's a wrench inside, Narvi replied, provoking a low giggle. Who's your secret friend, Bet? Loki asked with a mischievous grin, clearly enjoying seeing the wolf uncomfortable. Although he knew his wolf son well and knew that, despite his attitude, he would never give a mediocre gift. Bet sighed heavily and, without looking directly at anyone, turned his head toward a certain corner of the room. His gaze met that of a young woman who was looking at him with large curious eyes. My secret friend is Line, he finally said, in a firm voice, without beating around the bush, but with that dry tone that characterized him. There was a slight general murmur. Line? Lafia repeated, surprised. Him? Several voices whispered in unison. Line's eyes widened in shock. Her already pale face turned a soft instant red. And I, he asked, putting a hand to his chest, unsure if he had heard him correctly. Yes, you, Bet replied bluntly, walking over to her. Here, take this. I don't have all day. He handed her the bag unceremoniously, his gaze averted with boredom. Line took the bag with both trembling hands, as if she were being handed a sacred object. Her eyes shone with a mixture of surprise, nervousness, and something else. A soft feeling forming in her chest. Thank you, Bet-san, she whispered with a small, almost inaudible smile. Yeah, whatever you say, he muttered, turning quickly round to return to his seat with his hands in his pockets, hiding how he was clenching his fists out of sheer discomfort. But the peace did not last. Come on, Line, open it now. Tiona shouted, jumping almost on top of her. We want to see what the grumpy one in the family gave her. Elfie added with a mischievous smile. Line blinked several times and, still red as a tomato, carefully put a hand inside the bag, taking out a small dark velvet case. "What will it be? What will it be?" Narvi crooned. Line slowly opened the case and her eyes widened even more. Inside was a delicate and elegant bracelet with a luminous gem set in the center. The stone emitted a soft blue glow. It didn't look cheap, nor did it seem ordinary. "That is. Ooh, I recognize that gem," said an elf, leaning forward slightly for a better look. "It's an enchanted protective stone. It activates a barrier when the wearer is distracted or vulnerable, especially to magical attacks. It has limited uses, but it's very valuable. You can't find it just anywhere." "What?" Tiona exclaimed, her mouth agape. "You gave that to her, Bet." "To Line." The wolf let out a growl. "That was so sweet," Elfie shouted. "He's protecting her. In his own way," Tiona added excitedly. "He's a confirmed Sundeer," Narvi shouted, raising her fist. "Shut up, everyone." Bet growled with a roar that made some jump, but no one seemed intimidated. Rather, they were enjoying it. Meanwhile, Line continued to gaze at the bracelet with a tender expression. Then, with utmost care, she placed it on her wrist as if it were a gift from another world. "Thank you, Bet," she whispered, more to herself than for him to hear. Loki, watching everything from his makeshift throne of cushions and blankets, sighed with satisfaction. "Ah, how beautiful," she murmured, holding a glass in her hand. "I should do this every week next." Thus the game continued, now with many more eager to keep watching. "My secret friend is Rawl," A said, walking towards the human and giving him a decorated bag. "I hope they're not Jag-American," Rawl thought with a friendly smile as he looked inside. "Oh, what a surprise. They are Jag-American." "And the best of the post," whispered Ace with a sparkle in her eyes, thinking that she had given the best gift of all. "And my secret friend is Miss Riveria," Aki said with a nervous smile, handing the gift to the elf. "Thanks, Aki," she said with a smile, then whispered a few words to him. "And don't worry, I'm not going to open it here." Thank you very much." "My secret friend is Bet," Tyan said reluctantly, handing a box to the wolf. "Huh? What's this?" I asked, seeing a boat inside. "According to the seller, it's a special cream for cleaning your heels. They're combat boots." "My secret friend is Finn," Tiona shouted excitedly, giving the hobbit the gift. "Oh, thank you, Tiona," the captain said, taking the box and putting it aside. "Abrilo. I'll do it later. Now." And so the moment arrived. "Next." Loki shouted, pulling out another slip of paper. "Oh. One of my 3 favorite children, Belle." Quickly all eyes turned to the friendly albino of the family, who smiled nervously. I guess it's my turn," said Belle, trying to calm down as he started walking forward under everyone's watchful eyes. Mainly because of Alicia, who looked at him with great curiosity, wondering who he would give a gift to. After all, there were very few left. Belle walked toward the center with somewhat clumsy steps, firmly holding a box decorated with bright red paper and a white ribbon that had taken him forever to straighten. He felt as if each step reverberated in his chest. The entire room was watching him, but he could only feel one gaze in particular. Hers. His cheeks flushed slightly, knowing that Alicia was staring at him. He couldn't help but remember everything that had happened those days to prepare that gift. The looks he exchanged with Alicia. The faint, saddened smiles they exchanged. And today I would finally speak directly to her for the first time. He felt very nervous. He stopped in front of everyone, took a deep breath, and tried not to look directly towards where Alicia was, who was still watching him. Who could it be? The elf thought, feeling her heartbeat quicken. Who would be left without a gift? He and Elfie. The elf opened her eyes in shock as she finally realized that detail, feeling her cheeks blush intensely. It couldn't be Elfie since she had found out that Lafia would give the gift to the human. Then only she remained. It can't be, he thought as his heartbeat increased more and more. My secret friend as Belle began, but her voice sounded lower than she expected. What did he say? Narvi shouted from behind. Belle sighed and raised his voice slightly. My secret friend is Alicia, she finally said, with a mixture of embarrassment and something else she didn't want to analyze at that moment. There was a general murmur of surprise. Ooh, several voices said in unison, including Loki's. Alicia blinked, completely still. Even though it was completely obvious, it was still surprising to her, feeling the heat in her cheeks increase more and more. Meanwhile, Belle slowly approached the elf to speak to her directly for the first time in his entire life. For you, Belle said, with an awkward smile. I chose it with great care. Alicia stood up, walking with soft but hurried steps towards him. She took the box delicately, never taking her eyes off him, a blush creeping across her face that she couldn't control. The girls in the family began whispering among themselves with excitement and a desire to scream, knowing what was coming. Alice stood silently, staring at the gift in her hands. It was a medium-sized box, wrapped in bright red paper and tied with a white ribbon so carefully it looked as if someone had retied it several times before finally finishing it. She already knew. She'd sensed it even before he'd said her name. But to hear it from his own lips, in front of everyone, had left her heart racing. And now there he was, right in front of her, with those red eyes that she didn't dare hold for long, but that still made her feel like they were looking deeper into her than anyone else. He held the box delicately and looked down at it, as if he was having trouble breathing. He chose it carefully, she thought. For me. I don't know about you, but the atmosphere between them got weird, Cruz whispered to Raul, who was eating Jag American. Yes, very strange. So, amidst that cloud of sweet emotions, nerves, and romantic tension. Alicia. Loki shouted from the front, raising another piece of paper in the air. It's your turn, beautiful. Get that gift ready. Alicia looked up suddenly, as if she had just been woken up. Their eyes briefly met Belle's. And so. The final moment began. End of chapter. Chapter 8. This is not the last chapter. I will explain why at the end. It was night at the Loki family headquarters. Some members were already asleep, others were chatting and hanging out in the living room after the secret friend party that had been organized in the afternoon. Some were happy with their gifts, others not so much, but in the end it was an excellent day. And on one of the balconies of the headquarters, a certain elf was leaning on the railing, blushing as she watched a decorated box. It was the gift he received from Belle. Her blush only intensified as she recalled what happened when she gave Belle her gift. They're stupid, she thought, embarrassed. Flashback. Then my secret friend is Belle. These were the words that came out of Alicia sadly as she handed him the box she had carefully wrapped the night before. The albino opened his eyes in surprise upon hearing those words, not expecting to be Alicia's secret friend, he was completely clueless. While the rest of the family remained completely silent upon hearing those words. The eyes of almost all the women in the family began to shine with excitement and Alicia closed her eyes tightly, knowing what was coming. The legend came true. Romancee. They are destined to be together. At that point, Alice's face could not have turned any redder from the enormous shame she felt, lowering her gaze, not having the courage to look the rabbit in the face. Huh? What are you talking about? Belle asked, feeling both curious and nervous, as if he were about to hear something embarrassing. Nothing. They're just crazy. Alicia shouted, not wanting Belle to hear all that. It was the first time I'd spoken to Belle and it was this embarrassing. She wanted the earth to swallow her up. Legend says that if two people give each other gifts, it's because they're destined to be together. Love unites them. Tyan shouted with a smile full of excitement. And curiously, you two are the only ones who have given each other gifts. It's destiny. Aki shouted, joining the show only to see her friend embarrassed. That was just a silly legend Tyan made up. Alicia shouted, trying to look serious and angry, but her flushed face betrayed her. Don't deny it, Alicia. You've been staring at him all week. Love is in the air. Elfie shouted, joining in. And not only her. Belle's been watching her too. Their eyes kept meeting. Tyan shouted. Confirmed, whispered Ace eating Jag American. Even Ace noticed it. Elle and Alicia just lowered their gaze sadly, not knowing what to do, each holding in their hands the gift they had received from the other. I hate them, the elf whispered, tears welling in her eyes from immense shame. It's just a silly legend. It seemed that most of the girls in the family had conspired to annoy Alicia, while some boys looked enviously at Belle, knowing that they were creating a romance for him with one of the prettiest members of the family, without him doing practically anything. Imagine if we had had to give each other gifts, Cruz whispered to Raul. Don't start with your crazy ideas. No, seriously, imagine it. Cruz, you're scaring me. Meanwhile, the girls continued making comments that further embarrassed the elf and the rabbit. I knew it. This is no longer a game, it's a love story. Narvi shouted with fake tears in her eyes. They have to get married already. Loki, perform the ceremony right now. Aki added mockingly. They didn't even open the presents, Lafia tried to intervene, but no one heard her. Air Salme won. Tyan shouted, trying to hide her pain because she had been just one step away from Finn. That's false. Cried Alice. The legend is real if one believes in it. Replied the Amazon, completely convinced. And the gods bless those who give gifts from the heart. Added Loki, raising his cup in the air to join in the teasing. Congratulations, my two favorite lovebirds of the afternoon. We're not lovebirds. They both shouted in unison, completely red-faced. It was the first time the two of them had spoken, and it ended like that. It was nothing like what they imagined. I think that's enough with the teasing, Reveria said, crossing her arms. You'd better respect your classmates. Reveria-sama, Alicia whispered, moved. If there's a romance between the two of them, that's none of our business. Reveria-sama. End of flashback. "I hate this," whispered Alice, still blushing. The cooks had to arrive with the party food for the teasing to stop, otherwise they would probably still be getting teased. "Now I won't be able to look him in the face anymore," thought the elf, her head bowed. She was really excited about getting to know Belle better and maybe becoming friends, but now, because of her silly friends, that was ruined, as they kept saying that she had been staring at him all week long. She felt the illusion that had slowly grown throughout the week dissolving. She had observed Belle, yes, but not out of morbid curiosity or absurd interest. She had done so because she was drawn to the way he carried himself, calm, polite, shy, and at the same time, with a determination evident even in his smallest gestures. The way he helped others without seeking recognition, how he listened attentively to those who spoke to him. All of that to get the perfect gift. And now he would think she was a stalker. A lunatic who had been following him like an uncontrollable shadow. "Thanks, girls," he thought with a sarcasm that didn't take away his embarrassment one bit. "At that moment I just wanted to disappear. I felt like I had made a fool of myself in front of the boy I liked. It wasn't that I was in love, but that's how it all felt. I wanted to make a good impression, and it was the complete opposite," she thought, gently squeezing the gift in her hands. "And I won't even know if she'll like the gift I made for her." A tired sigh escaped her as she gazed at the starry sky, knowing that she would definitely never exchange words with him again. Everything had been ruined. Alicia? Or not? The elf froze upon hearing a voice behind her, slowly turning around and feeling her heart race. There, standing in the hallway that connected to the balcony, was Belle, still holding the gift he had received. Her eyes met his at that moment, and they sparkled as her cheeks flushed. The elf didn't know if she was having good or bad luck. "Are you coming here too?" asked Alice with a nervous smile, trying to hide her embarrassment. "Why yes. I wanted to think for a bit," Belle replied, also nervous. What a coincidence." "Yes, coincidence. This balcony has always been quiet," she murmured, scratching her cheek. "I suppose quiet places attract us both." He laughed softly, trying to maintain his composure. "Han. Oh, of course, go ahead," she said, making room beside him on the railing. Belle walked over and stood beside her, each with a nervous smile on their face. Remembering what happened that afternoon and how they were the object of everyone's ridicule was a great shame. And even more so because many people kept saying that they were destined to be together and things like that. Sorry about this afternoon, girls often behave foolishly," sometimes the elf apologized shyly, not having the courage to look him in the eyes. Belle blinked a couple of times and then looked down at the gift she still held in her hands. She squeezed the wrapping paper lightly, as if that gave her strength. "You don't have to apologize," she finally said, with a slightly more relaxed smile. "Actually I was glad." Alicia looked at him in surprise as her face flushed and her heart rate increased. "Were you happy?" she repeated incredulously. Belle nodded gently, scratching the back of his neck as he nervously looked away. "Why yes. What I mean is well, not the teasing itself," she quickly corrected herself, realizing how that sounded. "But that you were my secret friend made me happy." The elf looked at him silently, feeling her cheeks grow even hotter. She clutched her own box to her chest, trying not to smile like an idiot. But she couldn't help it. "Me too, I was happy," she confessed in a very low voice. "I wanted to give you something that would make you happy." Belle glanced at her sideways, and for a moment their eyes met. It was only a second, but it was enough for them both to look away instantly, completely flushed. "Have you opened your present yet?" Belle asked after a few seconds, wanting to change the subject and at the same time wanting to know her reaction. "And no, not yet," Alice replied, looking at the box in her arms. "No, I didn't feel ready. I was thinking a lot about everything that happened. And..." He was silent for a moment without taking his eyes off the box. "And I wanted to open it in peace. Without everyone watching," she added in a softer voice. Belle nodded, understanding. "I think that makes sense. I haven't opened mine yet either," she said, holding up her box in front of her. "I didn't want to do it without telling you something first." Alicia slowly raised her gaze, feeling her heart skip a beat. "Tell me something," he murmured, his heart racing again. "That was the girl's fault. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't have had those reactions." The albino swallowed. He took a breath. It wasn't easy. But he'd already come this far. And for some reason, on that balcony illuminated by the soft moonlight, with the distant sound of the muted laughter of the rest of the family in the living room, he felt he could do it. "Thank you for the gift and for thinking of me," she finally said, her voice warm as she recalled Alicia's expression when she gave her the gift and said, "I tried hard to make sure you liked it. No one has ever made me feel so special about something like this. Really thank you, Alicia." She remained silent, her eyes wide open, repeating the words in her mind. She looked at him and smiled. A small, sweet, almost shy smile. But filled with a sincere emotion that slowly grew in her chest. "I'm glad I had you as my secret friend too," she said honestly. although after everything the girl said, now I won't be able to look at you without thinking about that silly legend, haha. Belle let out a small, nervous laugh, remembering that. Yes, me neither. But, well, if it were true, I don't know if it would bother me that much, to be honest. Alicia looked at him suddenly, surprised. He blushed to the tips of his ears when he realized what he had just said and quickly covered his mouth. And I didn't mean to say, well, yes. It's just that she began to stammer awkwardly, not knowing how to fix her words. Alicia, for the first time since the afternoon, let out a small laugh, somewhat embarrassed but sincere. Relax, I understand now, he murmured, with a slight smile on his lips. And I think the same. Belle remained silent upon hearing that, lowering his gaze in embarrassment, as did the elf. They remained like that for a few more seconds, in silence, side by side, while the wind gently moved their hair. No one said anything more. There was no need. They both held their unopened gifts, but deep down they knew that the real gift had been that moment. That encounter. That coincidence that had brought them to the same place, under the same stars. It was curious that their first conversation together was like that, almost like a confession of love, even though that wasn't the intention of either of them. But the atmosphere was so perfect that they couldn't help but make those comments. Shall we open the presents? Belle broke the silence, making the elf look at him in surprise. Huh? Now? Yes, to be honest, I want to know if you like the gift, and that's it, he whispered, nervously looking away. Alicia felt embarrassed again. She didn't know if she was ready to see Belle's reaction to her gift firsthand. I was afraid she would make a face of disgust or something like that. If you want, I'll start, offered the rabbit, seeing the elf's nervousness and believing it was because she was opening her gift. And I. Noticing the eagerness in his eyes, Belle carefully began to remove the wrapping, not wanting to damage it, perhaps as a sign of respect for her. He could see that in one corner there was a dried flower, but it still retained its beauty. It's like my personal signature, Alicia confessed sadly. He's cute, Belle whispered, her embarrassment growing. Belle carefully opened the gift that Alice had given him. And inside, he found something he didn't expect. A notebook. But it didn't seem to be just a simple notebook like the ones you buy in any old store. That notebook felt special, like someone had made it recently, I could feel it. A handmade notebook. The cover was made of white leather, soft to the touch, with a discreet elven rune engraved in one corner. In the center, a small hand-engraved flame along with a small rabbit, as if honoring his nickname and his most famous magic. Belle ran his fingers over the surface in surprise, not believing what he was seeing. Then he opened it and noticed that each sheet was unique, strong yet light, with a faint forest scent. He could tell how each sheet had been carefully cut and sewn to the leather of the notebook, one by one. It was the first time I had seen something made with so much love. Did you do this? He asked, still surprised and unable to believe it, feeling that he had something much more valuable than the greatest treasure on earth. Alicia nodded, not daring to look him in the face. She felt extremely embarrassed. It was true that I really wanted to know her opinion, but now that I was about to receive it, I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. She had never felt so nervous in her entire life. I cut the leaves one by one. I used a type of tree that elves use to preserve writing. They're resistant to water, mild fire and they last for many years. I made the cover myself too, I explained, trying to stutter as little as possible. Belle was amazed to hear that. Alicia made a notebook by hand. Just for him. It's amazing. I've never seen anything so special and incredible, she whispered, feeling that the notebook was becoming more special with every passing second. She shrugged slightly, trying to hide the embarrassment that was more than obvious. I thought that since you're someone who works so hard, who's always learning, who fights, maybe you'd like to have a place to write down your ideas, your memories, your dreams, even where you can make your drawings so they last for many years. Belle looked at her, without speaking. She just smiled, she smiled sincerely, feeling an enormous warmth in her chest. And seeing that beautiful elf in a more and more special way. Alicia, I love it. She blinked in surprise and turned to look at him with excitement. Oh really? Yes. No one had ever given me anything like this before. It's clear that you thought of me. That you cared. And that's what makes it unique. That legend bothers me less and less. Alicia felt her chest fill with warmth and her face explode in red at those last words. I didn't even know if that rabbit was joking or telling the truth. He's stupid. First day talking and I felt like they were skipping a lot of steps. Now it's my turn. Alice whispered, determined to embarrass him now. Without noticing how Belle's eyes lit up with excitement, eager to know his opinion. Carefully, he unwrapped the package that Belle had given him, which he had apparently struggled to wrap, judging by the large number of folds in the wrapping. Upon removing it, he noticed a wooden box. It was beautiful. In fact, he wouldn't complain if the wooden box was the gift. But it was more than obvious that there was something inside him. So without further ado, she opened the box and saw the gift. And when he opened it, his eyes widened as he saw the contents, a glow appearing in them. His heartbeat increased. Inside the box was a beautiful necklace with a hand-braided cord, gold and brown, and in the center, protected by a small glass capsule, was a real white flower. Small, perfectly preserved, a flower from the elven forest where Alice came from, and one that didn't usually grow in Arario. Alicia was speechless as she carefully removed the necklace. Her fingers gently touched the glass, gazing at the beautiful flower. "Is this real?" she asked, barely able to believe it. Bell nodded, lowering his gaze slightly, somewhat embarrassed. "Yes. It was quite difficult to find, but I met a merchant who had traveled near the elven forest years ago. He had one flower preserved with magic, intact ever since, and I bought it from him. It was a stroke of luck, really," he explained, scratching his cheek. Alicia couldn't believe it. Her eyes even watered a little at what she was seeing. "Belle, this is from my land," she whispered, feeling a pang of nostalgia in her heart. "I know," he replied, looking at her with a shy smile. "I thought it would be nice to have something to remind you of home. Even though you're in a new place now, maybe carrying a little piece of it with you will be comforting." She looked at him. For a second she didn't know what to say. His heart beat faster than usual as he watched that albino in a more and more special way. "How is it possible that in just one day I'm making her feel so many things? Did you make this?" he asked, looking at the wood of the necklace and the strings. "Everything except the glass. I carved the wood, I braided the threads. I'm no expert, but I tried my best," he replied, scratching the back of his neck. "And I thought that if it was for you it had to be worth every bit of it." Alicia looked down at the necklace again. She held it against her chest, as if protecting something fragile and precious. "Thank you," she whispered, with a small smile. "It's more than I could have imagined. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever received. It's very kind of you." A beautiful smile formed on Alicia's face as she stared at Belle, who blushed at the sight of such a lovely expression. "I'm glad you liked it," I whispered, looking away. But there's still something else in the box." "Huh?" Alice quickly looked inside the box, and indeed there was something else, making her eyes widen in surprise when she saw what it was. I slowly take it out of the box, staring intently at the gift. It was a photo of her. No, it wasn't a photo, it was a perfectly done drawing of her sitting in a garden with a gentle expression and a smile. "Did you do this too?" asked Alice, her eyes wide and her face red, looking at the drawing as if it were a small treasure. Belle nodded with an awkward smile, scratching the back of his neck. "Yes. I drew it a few days ago. I wasn't sure whether to include it. I thought it might be too much. But I like how your smile looks. So I wanted you to see it too. Obviously, it's not perfect like the real girls, but I tried." Alicia remained silent, looking at the drawing once more. It was her, but there was something more. There was something in the way he portrayed her that made her seem warmer, more approachable. As if Belle had seen something in her that even she wasn't aware of. "Belle," he murmured softly, feeling his voice become a little shaky. He looked at her, somewhat worried. "Is that okay? I'm not bothering you?" "No, not at all," she interrupted. It's beautiful. I didn't know you drew so well." "Well, you know, when something inspires me, it's easier," she admitted, looking down, feeling her face burn. "And when the person I'm trying to draw is so beautiful the inspiration just keeps coming." Alicia put a hand to her chest. She felt that if her heart beat any faster it would jump out of her mouth. I couldn't believe he had done something like that. Not only had he taken the time to find a flower from his homeland, he had also carved wood, woven a necklace, and even drawn a portrait of her. All that just for her. "Belle, why did you do so much for me?" she finally asked, in a low voice. "You didn't have to do so much. I don't understand." He looked up, surprised by the question. He stared at her for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "Because I care about you," she finally said, her voice soft, almost as if she were reluctant to admit it. "And because I wanted to. Thinking about you made me happy. Thinking about what would make you smile even though we've never spoken until now, that's what I felt, wanting to do something special." Alicia remained silent, holding the necklace in one hand and the drawing in the other, unsure what to do with all that she felt. The moon shone down on them, gently illuminating the scene. The air was filled with a comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need breaking. Then, with a shy gesture, Alice extended the drawing towards her chest, as if she were hugging it along with the necklace, and turned towards Belle. "Thank you for seeing something beautiful in me. And for showing me that the gift I gave wasn't in vain. That it was completely worth it to do something special for you too." Belle looked at her, smiling. "It was perfect, Alicia, thank you so much." She lowered her gaze, but a sweet smile adorned her face. "Thank you too, you're a fool," he whispered. "But a good one." They both laughed, nervous but sincere, feeling an enormous warmth in their chests and seeing each other with a great sparkle in their eyes. For a moment there were no jokes, no teasing, no girls shouting, the legend came true. They weren't in the middle of a party, nor surrounded by nosy people. It was just the two of them, under the moon. Each holding the other's gift. And their hearts beating faster than usual. They didn't yet know if this was the beginning of something. They didn't know if destiny truly existed or if they were simply being swept along by an old legend invented by an overzealous Amazon. But at that moment it didn't matter. Because for the first time, they spoke for real. And they understood each other without needing to say much. That moment belonged only to them. Theirs and no one else's. End of chapter. Final chapter. It's funny how life changes. Yesterday, a person was just another silhouette in the crowd. A voice that could barely be distinguished above the noise of the world. And suddenly, without warning, without permission, that person becomes everything. The reason you smile without realizing it. And the thought that interrupts your days without asking permission. And the sigh you didn't know you were holding back. It's as if fate, capricious as it may be, decided that someone who yesterday was nothing. Today, everything is. You don't need years. Sometimes a single encounter is enough. A glance, a word. Or a game. And everything changes. And when that happens, when that person enters your life and transforms everything. You can no longer imagine a future where I'm not. It was an ordinary morning at the Loki family headquarters, 2 days after the crazy secret friend game ended. Now that the game was over, things had returned to normal. Or perhaps not so much. Mainly for a certain couple who had caught the family's eye in those days. Hey Belle. They were Belle and Alice. They were in the dining room where Belle was standing talking to Raul. Or so it was until Alicia arrived and gave him a little nudge with her shoulder, catching his attention. Belle turned to look at her and saw the beautiful smile that the elf wore on her face. Good morning. Alicia greeted cheerfully, a joy that she also spread to the albino. Good morning Alicia, she returned the greeting and also the little push with her shoulder, making the elf let out a soft and beautiful laugh. From that day on. From that night on. They both ceased to be complete strangers to each other within the family. They weren't speaking to each other a week ago. And now they greeted each other with great joy, as if they had been friends for a long time when they had not. Many knew that winning the sincere friendship of an elf was very complicated. Belle knew it more than anyone with Lafia, who now looked up to him as her brother. But with Alicia. One night was enough for the elf to become very friendly and cheerful with him. What took many people years to achieve with an elf only took Belle one day. And that was because the rabbit unknowingly reached the elf's heart with that beautiful gesture he made with his gift. Perhaps in a romantic way, or perhaps not, but he certainly touched her heart. And now their mornings had changed. They used to pass each other by without seeing each other. And now. Yule. There are lots of sweet things on the menu today. We have to take advantage. Exclaimed Alice excitedly. Ugh, you know I don't like sweets. Ha. Now those mornings were filled with pleasant conversations between the two of them. Anyway, I'll definitely bring you something to the table, she added, giving him a light pat on the arm before walking away, a walk that made her joy evident. Belle watched her, unable to suppress a smile. He felt comfortable with her. Calm. As if everything around him slowed down when she was near. Raul glanced at him out of the corner of his eye and couldn't help but whisper, with a playful smile. Have you had breakfast yet? Because it seems Alicia has you quite entertained. Huh? And no, that's not how it is. Belle blushed, looking away and scratching his cheek nervously. Sure, Raul laughed mockingly, something unusual for him, but with his buddy Belle, it was different. I'm just saying that wasn't seen 2 days ago. Something happened at that game. Some say they saw them alone on one of the balconies last night. Belle didn't answer. He just lowered his gaze slightly, remembering that night, the balcony, the cold breeze, and a gift she gave him with trembling hands, but a brave heart. A gift made with such care, so beautiful and so meaningful. And since then she had changed. Or perhaps not. Perhaps she had always been like that, only he hadn't noticed before. And now I couldn't stop noticing her. Alicia, from the table, watched him out of the corner of her eye as she stirred her coffee. Her friends whispered around her, but she wasn't bothered by it anymore. Because this time, what they were implying didn't seem so bad to her. Perhaps it no longer bothered her when people told her she smiled more when he was around. Or that her gaze sought him out without her realizing it. Or that her heart raced every time they exchanged a greeting. Because that person who was once just another member of the family now occupied a special place that even she didn't know how she had gotten there. But there she was. And I didn't want her to leave. Elle, he whispered her name barely audible, with a faint smile. Yes, something had changed. And neither of them could deny it. I didn't want to do it either. I can't believe it, you were right, Tainaki whispered, surprised, to the Amazon, seeing her friend's expression. I told you, the legend is true, I always knew it, said Tyan, crossing her arms proudly. Alicia looks happy, Narvi whispered. She doesn't just look happy, Aki added, resting her elbow on the table and her chin on her hand. She's different, lighter, don't you notice? Like she's been floating for days. I already told you, Tyan interrupted triumphantly, taking a sip of his juice. The legend is real. The game really can change everything. Not this again. Lafia murmured with a slight, though clearly interested, smile. What exactly was the legend? I only remember you saying it had something to do with couples or something like that. Tyan leaned forward as if she were about to share an ancient secret. Listen carefully, girls, she said in a low voice, but with the dramatic tone of a storyteller. It said that the Secret Santa game has a hidden magic. That if two people choose each other in some way, that small exchange of gifts can become the beginning of something special. Hidden spell? Narvi asked, half amused and half intrigued. Yes. Tyan exclaimed excitedly. Don't look at me like that. In the original story of the tradition, the first two who played fell in love. And ever since, it's believed that if there's an invisible bond, this game reveals it. And according to you, Alicia and Belle are under that spell now, said Aki, already convinced just by seeing how Alicia smiled more than usual. Exactly. Tyan exclaimed with a wide grin and raised eyebrows. And it shows. Alice hasn't laughed like that in as long as I can remember. And Belle, well, look at him. His eyes light up whenever he sees Alice. They all laughed softly, although none of them denied it. And to think that just a few days ago they weren't even speaking, Lafia said, with a touch of nostalgia. It's strange Alicia has always been so reserved. But with Belle she seems I don't know, calm. I don't think it's just about the legend, Narvi added in a softer voice. Sometimes a single action, a gesture, can make you trust someone. And Belle has that effect on people. He's sincere. He has no ulterior motives. Tyan nodded firmly. Whatever she did it well. Alicia looks more alive. And believe me, when an elf lowers her defenses so quickly, it's no coincidence. You two talk like you're already a couple, Aki joked. They're not yet, Tyan corrected with a confident smile. But the game has done its part. Now it's up to them. They looked back at the other table, just in time to see Belle and Alicia occasionally glancing at each other, even though they were at different tables. The connection was obvious. And although not everyone knew it yet, in that corner of the dining room, the famous legend that Tyan invented about the game of secret friends had just written a new chapter in Two of His Friends. And everything happened little by little. It wasn't rushed or anything like that. But even though Belle and Alicia weren't a couple, everyone, absolutely everyone, knew something. That something was going on between the two of them and that they were more than friends. As the weeks went by, each member of the family noticed how the two of them were becoming closer and closer. Something they never imagined before, but now. It was a reality. Like that day. Elfie was looking for a book in the upstairs library, that quiet corner that few people ever went up to. She was humming softly, her hair a little disheveled and a notebook full of notes tucked under her arm. 100 years of slavery, where could that book be? He murmured, running his fingers along the spines of the books on one of the shelves. He stopped abruptly when he heard a soft familiar giggle. He slowly turned his face, and his eyes widened as he took in the scene unfolding on the other side of the corridor, right between two columns of books. Ooh! She exclaimed in amazement, bringing both hands to her mouth as she quickly hid behind the nearest bookshelf. What do my big eyes see? There they were. Belle and Alicia sat at one of the tables in the reading corner. Both were leaning over the same book, but it was clear that the story on the pages wasn't the only thing that interested them. Alicia laughed, her body leaning forward, almost touching Belle's, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Belle smiled too, with that calm expression he only showed when he felt completely at ease. Elfie peeked her head out just a few centimeters, observing them with a mixture of tenderness and poorly disguised emotion. Haha, wow, how cute, she whispered with a smile she couldn't contain. And then he saw it. The shirt. She's wearing a shirt with her boyfriend's face on it. She screamed mentally, holding back a stifled squeal with all her might. It was a simple cotton shirt with a cartoon bunny printed on the front. It wasn't something a girl would wear if she didn't care about the guy. Much less if she didn't like him. Much less if she didn't love him a little. Everyone compared Belle to a rabbit. That was no coincidence. Elfie put a hand to her chest and sighed. Oh please, Alicia. And then you say they're nothing. On the other side, oblivious to the accidental spy, Belle calmly leafed through the pages. I still don't understand why the protagonist always makes the stupidest decisions, Alicia whispered, frowning and pointing at a paragraph. Haha, and we're only halfway through the book. I don't even want to imagine what comes next, Belle replied, still laughing as she turned the page. They both leaned in a little further and their arms brushed against each other, but neither of them moved away. Elfie just shook her head and turned away, walking slowly down the corridor with a silly smile on her face. And they say they're nothing, she muttered as she went downstairs. An elf being so attached to a human, at this rate they'll be kissing each other all over soon. She didn't need to see any more. That scene was worth 1,000 words. She could feel it in the air. At first, everyone thought Belle and Lafia were romantically involved because of how close they were. But it only took a little observation to realize that those kinds of feelings weren't there between them. Their bond was more like that of siblings. But with Alicia, that was different. It was noticeable in the way she looked at him when she thought no one was watching. In how her eyes lit up when Belle laughed. In how she blushed even when she simply greeted him in the morning. And it was noticeable in him too, in how his voice softened when he spoke to her, in how his gestures became more attentive, more gentle. Yes, it was obvious. And soon it would be much more so. Like any other day and any other week. The fierce storm had begun to rage over Arario. The rumble of thunder and the steady patter of rain on the roofs and windows filled the air with a sound that, far from being bothersome, seemed to bring a sense of calm and nostalgia. Inside the Loki Familia headquarters, several members were gathered in the long main hallway, leaning against the large glass windows that overlook the main entrance. How strange that a storm like this arrived so suddenly, Cruz murmured, crossing his arms. Yes, but I don't know why, it makes me want to curl up under a blanket and watch it rain, Aki added with a calm smile. This rain makes me want bread and coffee, Cruz whispered, prompting an immediate nod from Aki. Or better yet, buttered bread and cheese, added Elfie, who was walking behind and listening to the conversation. The atmosphere was calm. Raindrops fell in bursts against the windows, while flashes of lightning momentarily illuminated the sky, followed by claps of thunder that made the walls tremble for an instant. Everything seemed so simple, so ordinary. Until Narvi, who had been a little further ahead, tensed slightly and pointed excitedly downwards. Hey! Look at that. Immediately, all heads turned toward the main entrance of the headquarters. And what they saw caused a mixture of mocking smiles to fill the hallway. Well, Aki whispered with a playful spark in her voice, squinting as if she had discovered a prank. There were Belle and Alicia walking together under a single umbrella. They were so close their shoulders were touching, Alicia talking animatedly and smiling, sometimes waving her free hand for emphasis. Belle was looking at her with an attentive and serene expression, almost as if nothing else existed in that moment but the sound of her voice. Could you be any more obvious? Elfie said with a mischievous smile as she crossed her arms. Does that count as an official date or are you still in the just friend stage? Narvi joked, holding back a laugh. And so, as was customary in the Loki family, the shouting began. Long live the bride and groom. One of the boys exclaimed from the second floor, clapping his hands loudly to make sure they could be heard. Elle and Alicia stopped instantly, both turning their heads upwards. From their position under the umbrella, they could see perfectly all the members of the family watching them from the hallway windows. And they could also see their mocking smiles. Are you done with your romantic date? Elfie shouted. Was there a kiss at the end? Narvi added, raising her eyebrows mischievously. Elle's face instantly flushed red, a mixture of embarrassment and nervousness reflected in his expression. Alicia, for her part, also blushed, but her reaction was more hostile. She frowned and pressed her lips together in annoyance. Idiots. We weren't on a date. She yelled back, raising her umbrella with one hand as if it were a weapon. Oh no. Then why are they walking so close together? Aki replied, laughing. Is it because it's raining, you idiot? And that romantic atmosphere with the rain? Elfie insisted. Alicia snorted. Then, without another word, she took Belle's hand. The sudden contact made Belle freeze for a second, staring at her in surprise. The elf only glanced at him sideways, her cheeks still flushed, but her expression determined. Let's go, Belle, he said sharply, without letting go of her hand. Let's not listen to these fools. Why yes, the boy replied, nodding quickly. How cute. The girls shouted in unison. The two crossed the main entrance without looking back, still holding hands. They were probably heading for the common room or the dining hall, but that detail hardly mattered. The only thing everyone noticed, and wouldn't let go unnoticed, was how natural it now seemed to see them like this. Did you notice how Belle didn't try to let go of her hand? Narvi commented with a mischievous smile. He doesn't resist anymore, Aki added. He likes being led by the hand. So sweet. They're taking your job, Cruz whispered into Lafia's ear, who had arrived late to the scene, but had heard everything. Lafia narrowed her eyes, a slight shadow of discomfort on her face. Belle isn't going to leave me behind, she whispered to herself, trying to convince herself, though the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. It wasn't love. It was the jealousy of a sister very attached to her older brother, the fear of losing her place by his side. Soon Alicia will be your sister, Elfie said mockingly. After all, your brother's girlfriend becomes part of the family, doesn't she? And what if they get married? Narvi added. You'll have to call her sister-in-law. The laughter started immediately. Lafia could only puff out her cheeks in frustration. It's not that big of a deal. The rain continued to fall outside with the same intensity. But inside the headquarters, the only thing that continued to grow was the closeness between Belle and Alicia. And everyone, absolutely everyone, knew it. But it would continue to grow. One day, Cruz was walking through the headquarters hallways with his hands in his pockets and a neutral expression on his face. His day had been like any other. Routine, training, some food, and then more training. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing special. Just the monotonous rhythm of someone who lived to get stronger. But as she passed one of the lounges in the West Wing, her ears caught a peculiar conversation. A soft murmur escaped through the half-open door and she recognized a woman's voice instantly. "Come on, Belle, don't move around so much." Cruz stopped, raising an eyebrow curiously. He peeked in cautiously, not out of nosiness, but out of a sense of responsibility. After all, you never knew what kind of mischief young people might get up to when they thought no one was watching. So he crept into the room stealthily, leaning against the doorframe. What she saw, however, was neither a compromising scene nor anything out of place. Rather, it was like catching a glimpse of a stolen fragment from a romantic story, one of those tales Tyan loved. Belle was standing there wearing a type of clothing he didn't usually wear. A certain discomfort could be seen in his expression. Facing him, with an almost artistic expression of concentration, Alicia held a slender paintbrush in her elegant fingers. A blank canvas lay before her. Her brow was slightly furrowed and the tip of her tongue peeked out from between her lips as she traced soft but determined lines. It's a bit difficult to stay in the same position for more than an hour, Belle murmured, barely moving his shoulders, as if that would help release tension. "No." Alice replied without looking up. "Don't move. You'll ruin my neckline and I don't want to repeat it for the 5th time." Cruz couldn't help but smile slightly. The scene had something tender about it. "Wow," he whispered to himself, almost with a touch of nostalgia. "When did everyone start experiencing things like this and I didn't even notice?" He leaned a little further against the wall, still looking. Inside the hall, Belle tried to maintain her composure, but her cheeks were getting redder and redder. "Are you almost done?" she asked with a mixture of hope and embarrassment. "No." "And stop asking," Alicia replied, frowning again as she leaned closer to the canvas to refine Belle's eyes. "I just need a few more touches. I want the drawing to be perfect, just like you." The phrase came out of her lips so naturally that she herself didn't realize what she had just said until Belle looked down, completely blushing. "Huh?" he stammered awkwardly. "Be perfect like me?" Alicia froze for a moment, blinked, and as if suddenly feeling the weight of her own words, spoke nervously. "I mean, I want it to look good. I'm not going to draw just any old ugly thing, okay? Don't move, Belle." "But you said it was perfect," he retorted, even redder. Be quiet." Cruz narrowed his eyes, amused. It was impossible not to enjoy this little spectacle. The atmosphere between them wasn't scandalous, it was warm, light. As if the whole world were a little softer around them. "And you're going to give it to me?" Belle asked, with a small, hopeful smile. No, the answer was immediate and firm. "Huh? I'm going to have it in my room," she added, lowering her voice until it was barely audible. "On the wall." Belle swallowed hard. And he almost lost his balance. "Are you going to have a drawing of me in your room?" Alicia shrugged slightly, holding her paintbrush aloft, as if she had nothing to hide. "Of course. I'm more than sure you have one of my drawings in your room too. That way we'll be even." "Ugh. I knew it," she laughed softly. "You'd better have drawn me well, you fool." "Yes, well, it depends on your definition of good." "That? Nothing. I was just joking. Don't make me get up from this chair, Belle." "My nose itches," he whispered desperately. "Don't move." From the doorway, Cruz let out a soft chuckle and carefully stepped aside so as not to interrupt the moment. She continued walking down the hallway, her hands still in her pockets, but with a touch of melancholy in her eyes. "I feel alone," he whispered to the air, not waiting for a reply. "I focused so much on being strong that I forgot everything else." Sigh. "Oh, okay." She shrugged, forgetting her sadness and continuing on her way. At that point, everyone, absolutely everyone, wanted those two to be a couple. And perhaps they weren't so far from the truth. Or who knows? Curiosity would consume them. "What are you doing?" Alicia jumped slightly in fright, her heart leaping in her chest, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. The voice had taken her completely by surprise, breaking the silence of the library. She was sitting on one of the long sofas in the library, that seldom used corner. Belle was fast asleep on her lap, his head resting against her thigh, his expression peaceful and his breathing gentle. For some time now, Alicia had been slowly stroking his hair, letting her fingers sink into those white strands, as if they were silk. She watched him with an affection she would never have allowed herself to show in front of others. But now they were not alone. Turning slowly, her cheeks still flushed, she saw Lafia standing by the entrance. The other elf was looking at her with a neutral expression, but her eyes conveyed something more, a mixture of annoyance and a hint of astonishment. Alifia, hello, Alicia greeted immediately, nervously, her voice slightly trembling. I didn't hear you come in. Lafia didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on Bell, who continued sleeping, oblivious to everything. His hair barely moved with his breath and his face was completely relaxed, without a trace of the stress he usually carried. Alicia suddenly felt heat rise up her neck to the tips of her ears. Is Bell asleep? Lafia finally asked, walking a little closer, without losing that curious tone. Why yes, Alicia replied, looking down shyly. Last night, that silly fool stayed up training late and this morning he was exhausted. He said he'd only rest here for a few minutes. He paused, trying to sound natural, while discreetly removing his hand from Bell's hair. In your lap? The silence that followed that question was heavy. Well, Alicia began, not quite sure how to explain herself. He looked uncomfortable asleep on the table and I just wanted him to be more comfortable, you know. Lafia raised an eyebrow. Her face still showed neither a smile, nor mockery, nor approval. Only analysis. Alicia swallowed. Why did she feel so intimidated? Lafia wasn't shouting, nor had she made any accusations. But still, the tension was palpable. Lafia sighed suddenly, crossing her arms with a hint of resignation. I'm still surprised at how close you two became in such a short time. It's surreal, honestly. Alicia lowered her gaze, gently biting her lower lip. Haha, she laughed nervously. I didn't expect it either. We didn't even say hello before and now. She didn't finish the sentence. She just looked at Bell, still asleep, and her fingers unconsciously returned to stroking his hair, this time more subtly. Lafia noticed but said nothing. She simply moved a little closer to the sofa without invading Alicia's personal space and spoke in a softer voice. I'm not going to ask you if they're dating. Or if they like each other. Or any of those things that everyone else is so obsessed with. Alicia sighed in relief, almost smiling. It was unusual for Lafia to be so direct, but at least she didn't seem to want to make fun of her like the others. Thank you, he said softly. But added Lafia. The tone changed immediately. Alicia looked up just in time to see Lafia's gaze sharpen considerably. Her eyes gleamed with an intensity she had rarely witnessed. Then, slowly, Lafia raised her right hand and ran her index finger along her own neck in a clear and threatening gesture. If you hurt him, if you play with him, if you make fun of him even just a little. She paused to make sure Alicia was listening. And she certainly was. I kill you. The silence was absolute. Alicia froze, her ears pricked up, unsure whether to take it as a joke or a death threat. Hey, are you joking? He asked in a weak voice. Lafia smiled sweetly, too sweetly. Do you think he would do it? Alicia didn't answer. She just nodded very slowly, without taking her eyes off her. Although she knew Lafia was kinder than she seemed, that threat didn't sound empty. Good. Lafia's smile softened, as if everything were back to normal. She took a step back, looking at Bell with a certain tenderness. I don't want to wake him, so I'll go. I'll leave you two alone. And without another word, he turned on his heels and walked away calmly, as if he hadn't just made a threat worthy of a gangster novel. Alicia remained motionless on the sofa for several seconds, staring at the door through which Lafia had disappeared. Then she let out a long tired sigh, slumping back against the sofa. Damn, he murmured softly. I never thought Lafia could be so scary. A drop of sweat trickled down his temple as he looked at Bell, who was still asleep, unaware of the interrogation that had just taken place. And she only sees him as a brother, she reflected. I don't even want to imagine what it would be like if she were in love with him. He made a small grimace and then looked down at Bell. The boy had unconsciously tucked his head a little further into his lap, as if his body knew exactly where it wanted to be. Elves are strange, he thought, sighing again. Then he narrowed his eyes with an amused expression. I'm one too. And putting all that aside for a moment, she tenderly stroked Bell's hair again. Sleep peacefully, fool, I'll protect you from any murderous elf, it's more like I'm the one who needs protection. One day, Line was walking peacefully down a street near a small park. She had gone out to buy a few things for her room and was now returning, a small bag slung over her left arm. The gentle afternoon breeze caressed her face, making strands of her hair move gracefully around her. It was a quiet afternoon, one of those when everything seemed to be going well. She walked while glancing at the gift Bet gave her, which made her smile happily. Despite the peace she felt, something caught her attention. It was an instinctive impulse, as if something in the air whispered to her to look in a specific direction. Her steps slowed gently, and she turned her head toward the park on the other side of the path. That's when she saw them. Under one of the largest trees in the place, sitting on the grass covered with dry leaves, were Bell and Alicia. She looked at him intently for a moment. Bell sat cross-legged, speaking with enthusiasm, his hands gesturing slightly as he explained something. Alicia, seated beside him, tilted her head a little, her golden hair gleaming in the sunlight filtering through the branches. She wore a light blouse and a skirt that swayed gently in the breeze. But what was most striking was her expression. Her large clear eyes were fixed on Belle, filled with tenderness and admiration. Alicia laughed softly, covering her mouth with her hand as Belle made a funny face. At some point, he reached out to point at something in the sky, perhaps an oddly shaped cloud, and instead of looking up, she looked at him. With that look. Lion noticed it instantly. He remained silent, almost without breathing for a few seconds. She knew that look perfectly. It wasn't just a kind gesture or a smile between friends. It was something deeper. It was the way their eyes soften, how their pupils seem to sparkle, how their body relaxes when they're near someone who makes their soul feel safe. It was the look of a girl in love. The silent gaze that screamed everything that words couldn't express. A gaze that said, "This is it. This is where I want to stay." And Lion understood. Wow, she barely whispered, smiling involuntarily. She wasn't the type to meddle in other people's business. Unlike Narvi or Elfie, she didn't go around snooping or making up romantic theories about her classmates. But that didn't mean she was blind. She had noticed, for some time now, how the relationship between Belle and Alicia had changed. Before, they barely spoke, each locked in their own world. But now they shared moments, walked together, sought each other out with their eyes, even amidst a hustle and bustle. And although they said nothing, although they denied it if anyone asked, their actions spoke volumes. "I guess in the end, fate always finds a way," she said with a slight sigh. She glanced again at the two young people under the tree. Belle was offering Alicia some of his drink, and she, after a small laugh, accepted with a slight blush. They were comfortable, happy, as if the rest of the world had faded away around them. Lion didn't want to interrupt. She didn't want to make any noise or distract them from that moment that was clearly just for them. So she just stayed a few more seconds, observing from a distance. And even if she wasn't curious or gossipy. Although she wasn't one to get easily excited about things like that. Deep in her heart, she felt a sincere desire. "I hope so," she whispered, closing her eyes for a moment. "I hope you two can be happy together. Very happy." But that silent blessing, she continued on her way. Bet's gift was still clutched in her fingers and a peaceful smile lit up her face. Love was beautiful in her eyes. At that point, everyone in the family who was a complete gossip wanted to know if the two of them were a couple or not. Curiosity was killing them. And worst of all, even though they asked both Belle and Alicia directly, they only responded with the same smile, as if they shared a secret they refused to reveal. Alicia simply smiled, tilted her head slightly, and replied in a very polite tone. "Huh? Us? What things they say." And Belle, although nervous at first, had already begun to respond with a mischievous half-smile. "I don't know, maybe." They didn't know if it was a way of getting revenge on them for the teasing they received the day they exchanged gifts. Whatever they were very evil. But there was one thing everyone was clear about, a silent certainty that no one dared to deny. If they weren't a couple yet, they would be soon. It was too obvious. The way they sought each other with their eyes, the way their laughter intertwined, that silent language they shared without saying a word. The chemistry between them was almost magical. Some couldn't understand how it was possible that before that innocent secret friend game they weren't even close. If it weren't for Loki, someone said thoughtfully. If it weren't for Loki, that friendship would never have happened. And maybe they were right. In the end, and to the surprise of many, it seemed that Loki had done something good after all, something truly good for the first time in a long time. One of his pranks had ended up being the origin of one of the sweetest stories that everyone was witnessing in real time. Meanwhile, on the second floor of the headquarters, a figure silently observed the scene. Diane peered out of her bedroom window. The breeze gently stirred her hair as she crossed her arms on the frame and lowered her gaze. There they were, Belle and Alicia, at the entrance of the building, getting their gear ready, as if they were preparing to go out on a small mission or maybe a casual walk. Seeing them like that, side by side, made the Amazon let out a soft laugh and a smile appear on her lips. It was one of those genuine smiles, with a touch of grace and a hint of irony. Who would have thought it? Tyne murmured, barely in a whisper. Her eyes lit up a little more when she saw what happened next. They looked at each other for a few seconds, exchanging a few words inaudible from their window, and then Alicia timidly extended her hand. Belle accepted it without hesitation. Their fingers intertwined for a few seconds. It wasn't a passionate or exaggerated gesture. It was something small, but full of tenderness. An intimate yet visible moment. Tyne couldn't help but let out a low, soft laugh, amused by the whole thing. "The story I invented myself turned out to be true," she said to herself, resting her forehead against the window frame. Yes. The famous legend of the secret friends destined to fall in love that she had told at the beginning of it all was completely false. A simple fabrication to justify her obsession with Finn and thus torment him more freely. A pointless rumor she herself had exaggerated to spice up the celebration. And to think I did it just so I could harass the captain in style, she sighed, laughing and shaking her head. How pathetic I was. But for that couple, those two down there laughing nervously while still holding hands, the result was different. For them, the story wasn't a joke. It wasn't made up. It wasn't an excuse. It was real. I didn't know if it was because of the legend or simply destiny, but something had united them. And the strangest thing of all was that it worked. Despite their differences, their pasts, one's shyness and the other's reserved nature, together they shone. Diane tilted her head and watched them closely as Belle gently released Alicia's hand. It seemed they only wanted to share that brief contact for a few seconds. Nothing more. Nothing too obvious. But it was noticeable. Of course it was noticeable. That simple touch had said more than 1,000 words. They were in love. There was no other possible explanation. Well, Tyne whispered with a wistful smile as she watched them slowly walk away, taking the path that led out of the main garden. Maybe the legend, from now on, really is true, he adjusted his posture, resting his chin on one hand. From there he watched them walk away amid jokes and small laughs. A pair of lovebirds, she added tenderly, narrowing her eyes with a touch of envy. Everyone agreed on one thing. It didn't matter how, when, or who said it first. What was happening between Belle and Alicia was undeniable. It wasn't fake. It wasn't a game. It was not a fleeting illusion. It was affection. It was affection. It was love. Perhaps they didn't know for sure yet. Perhaps they hadn't put it into words. Perhaps a little more time was needed. Or perhaps they both already knew and didn't want to reveal it. But the truth was clear to everyone. Bellcranel and Alicia Forestlight were destined to fall in love. Destined to be together. And it all started with a silly game. With a random slip of paper. With a handmade gift. With two hearts that didn't know each other but were searching for each other from the very first moment. And so, with both of them laughing and looking at each other affectionately as they walked away from the headquarters, the story ended. Or rather, the real story was about to begin. And let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.